Chapter 37. Give me another one. Morrison's pointed at his eyebrows and said with an obsequious smile. His soft armor had been soaked in sweat, and his chest was heaving up and down violently. This was normal. He had been practicing his swordsmanship for the whole morning. No matter how strong he was, he would be exhausted. Hanjin rolled his eyes at Morrison's. He didn't say anything and continued to carve his wooden commander seal. Prophet, please give me another one. Moxing begged like a child who wanted to get some candy. Hanjin sighed. He couldn't stand Morrison's being like this. A big man had turned into a child. Morrison's was pitiful and gave Hanjin goosebumps. Hanjin drew a charm of spirit refreshment in the air and waved his hand. The charm was printed on Morrison's eyebrows. Morrison's suddenly straightened his body and laughed. He waved his sword and strode into the forest. Hanjin continued to carve his wooden commander's seal. After a few strokes, he suddenly felt something and slowly raised his head. Sasu was standing where Morrison's was, looking at him with a smile. Sasu's eyes were almost the same as Morrison's. There was longing and pleading in his eyes, but Sasu was shy and didn't say it out loud. Hanjin was speechless for a while. It had been a month since he left the 11th town. During this month, his status and the nature of the whole team had changed. In the past, they were all friends and cooperated with each other. But now, Hanjin had become the leader of the team. This was not a result of voting, but an irreversible trend. The reason for this was the charm of spirit refreshment, which Hanjin had never cared about before. A month ago, when he was interrogating the bad merchant George, he had cast the charm of spirit refreshment in order to keep George from fainting, which had attracted Moxing's attention. After they settled down in the forest temporarily, Moxing had urged Hanjin to cast a spell for him, which was called Come On. The potential of the charm of spirit refreshment was discovered, which made Morrison's, Sasu, and the others wild with joy. The foundation of a warrior was fighting power, and the foundation of a magician was magic power. But how to release the fighting power, how to control the fighting power, how to gather the elements, and how to control the elements all required the support of spiritual power. In this world, it was very difficult to replenish one's mental strength through external means. Powerful light magic of the sacrificial type could at most increase one's combat strength and defense. Apart from light magic of the forbidden spell and a sacrificial spell, no magic of any level could replenish one's mental strength. One could only rely on time to slowly recover. Hanjin's charm of spirit refreshment broke this impossibility. The charm of spirit refreshment could not only greatly improve spiritual power, but also improve physical strength and endurance to a limited extent. In Morrison's words, one day's practice of swordsmanship now was equivalent to 6 or 7 days' practice in the past. Hanjin showed them an infinitely tempting future. As a professional, what could be more attractive than rapid improvement of strength? However, Hanjin, who was becoming more and more loved, was having a hard time. Although he had been absorbing 300 or 400 yuan of energy every day for a month, the daily expenditure was not small. He was really distressed. You want to try it too? Hanjin raised his eyebrows. Huh. Sasu laughed embarrassedly. Hanjin helplessly drew a charm of spirit refreshment. Don't just meditate. When can you give me my space ring? I've never touched space magic before, so Sasu saw that Hanjin was a little disappointed, so he quickly changed his words. Don't worry. Give me another half a month, and I'll definitely open the space in that space ring. Don't push yourself too hard. Hanjin shook his head slightly. In the past month, I've been improving very fast. I believe that it won't be long before I become a real senior warlock. By then, I'll be more confident. Hanjin paused. Sasu, don't be too tired. You're different from Morrison's. He's as strong as a wild bull. He'll be fine no matter how hard he works. I know. Don't worry about me. Sasu smiled. Hanjin sighed and swallowed the words he wanted to say. Now that everyone was so excited, he didn't want to hurt anyone. He had never used the charm of spirit refreshment on anyone like this. To put it bluntly, the charm of spirit refreshment was somewhat similar to a stimulant. Although it could be very effective, It was unknown whether repeated use would cause side effects to Morrison's and the others. After Sasu walked away, Hanjin continued to carve the wooden talisman. After a long while, he finally finished. He sighed and threw the dark green bead to Sunir. Sunir sat 3 meters away from Hanjin and quietly observed Hanjin. She reached out and caught the bead. "You're not doing it today?" "Yes. I'm a little tired." Hanjin nodded. He paused for a moment and smiled. "Sunir, why have you been staying with me for the past 2 days? Aren't you bored?" "No." Sunir shook her head. "Do you need to come for a while too?" Hanjin emphasized the words "come for a while" in a frivolous tone. "No need," Sunir answered seriously. "I know that every time you cast a spell, you need to absorb the elemental energy from the magic crystals. It's not easy. They don't understand, so they keep asking you to help them." "Ha! This is a secret between the two of us, isn't it?" "Yes. Yes." Hanjin played with the table knife in his hand. He was a little surprised. Among them, he was the only one who didn't want to talk about his past. He couldn't. The others had more or less told their stories. With Sunir's amazing experience, she should be able to understand this kind of joke. Unless she was completely inexperienced in this aspect. Chile has been too embarrassed to come to you. Also, Stillberg has started to learn magic from Sasu. In a few days, they should come to you for help. When did this happen? He didn't tell me. About half a month ago, Sasu said that Stillberg is very talented. It's a pity that he's too old now. This kid, Hanjin felt a headache coming. Although they were all friends, there were still differences between close and distant. Stillberg was the most important person in his heart. Although he was weak, he couldn't ignore Stillberg even if he didn't care about anyone else. Thinking about it, he would have to spend more money in the future. "Lord Prophet, it's time to eat." Michel walked over with a smile. Ever since Hanjin's ability was recognized, his attitude toward Hanjin had changed drastically. Whenever he opened his mouth, he would call him Lord. "Okay, let's eat first. We'll talk after eating." Hanjin smiled. Chapter 38. The atmosphere of the forest was very quiet, and the scenery was very elegant. However, it wasn't suitable for young people to live here. The older people didn't mind, but the difference in mentality between the two was too big. It was very boring here, and there was almost no entertainment. They couldn't count ants for fun, right? After dinner and before bed became the golden period. Everyone sat together and chatted about everything. Even Sunir, who usually didn't like to talk much, opened her mouth. "Sunir, tell us." Chile looked at Sunir with sparkling eyes. Ever since she knew that Sunir was once a commander, especially the commander of the heroic army in that famous battle, she had begun to admire Sunir. "What's there to talk about?" Sunir said dispiritedly. "You're a hero. Everyone is waiting to hear your story," Sasu said with a smile. "Hero." Sunir's tone was full of sarcasm. "It's not easy to be a hero. I was the 9th commander. Do you know why I was able to become a commander? It's because the previous commanders all died in battle." Everyone was stunned. They didn't know why Sunir's mood had changed so much. Sunir bit her lips and said softly, "Forget it, don't ask. Let me tell you, war isn't as interesting and meaningful as you think. It's full of ugliness, cruelty, and blood. If you have the chance to walk on the battlefield, you will understand. However, I hope that you will never have the chance." "Sunir, you underestimate our tolerance," Hanjin said calmly. "Of course, Chile is an exception. What's wrong with me?" Chile rolled her eyes at Hanjin. "Yes, I agree." Morrison's patted Hanjin's shoulder and said loudly, "Sunir, we are very interested in your experience. Tell us." "You guys," Sunir said helplessly, "a long time ago, the elves lived on fruits. But now, I'm eating whatever you guys eat. Don't you think I'm weird?" Hanjin and the others looked at each other. They had not noticed this before, but thinking about it carefully, it was indeed so. Because the war completely changed our civilization. Sunir said slowly, "Sometimes being picky will cost us our lives. We don't have the right to be picky, especially in war. If we can't find food, we'll take off our leather armor and cook it. What else can we not eat?" Chile couldn't help but cover her mouth with her hand. She couldn't understand how the tough leather armor could become food. Actually, I'm not the real commander. In the last battle, we were about to win when we were suddenly attacked by 5 red dragons. In the end, we could only scatter and escape. At that time, I only had 100 or so companions with me. They elected me as the commander. My task was not to lead them to victory, but to bring them safely back to Wild Willow City. Sunir's voice became lower and lower. However, including me, only 7 elves returned to Wild Willow City in the end. You've seen a red dragon? Still, Berg exclaimed. In his opinion, the giant dragon was an extremely distant and powerful existence. Not only have I seen it, but we also killed a red dragon together, Sunir said lightly. What about the dragon crystal? Han Jin asked anxiously. Most of the time, he could keep calm, but when it came to energy, he became another person. There are still 4 red dragons in the sky. Do you think we should go look for the dragon crystal? Han Jin felt that it was a pity. However, after thinking about it, even if the elves dug out the dragon crystal, it might not fall into anyone's hands. Anyway, it had nothing to do with him. I'm a bit tired. Sunir stood up and walked to the back. Sunir, don't go. Morrison's hurriedly shouted. Sunir acted as if she didn't hear Morrison's and disappeared into the forest without looking back. She really didn't have it easy. Sasu said softly. Actually, in that war, every elf that survived didn't have it easy. You know? Morrison's asked. I only know a little. After all, it was something that happened 10 years ago. Sasu said slowly. Lord Zagund and Lord Kassa jointly launched a large-scale attack. Wild Willow City. Lord Kassa? How come I've never heard of him? Don't interrupt. Listen to me and you'll know. Cessation said discontentedly. At that time, the situation of Wild Willow City and the Holy Crown City was very passive and dangerous. Wild Willow City sent an elite archer squad and the Silver Pegasus Regiment to penetrate into the rear of Lord Kassa's army and launch a sneak attack. They persisted for more than a year, destroyed 2 large magic transmission formations, annihilated numerous small troops, and burned a large number of military supplies. Except for the main city of Lord Kassa, they had occupied all the other cities, some even several times. Lord Kassa's main force was fighting with Dismark and couldn't rescue the rear. Moreover, the Silver Pegasus Legion was very fast. It was very difficult to find them, let alone a decisive battle. In the end, Lord Kassa had no choice but to take the risk and send out several red dragons and guards to outflank the Silver Pegasus Legion. Sasu paused. Dismark had been waiting for this opportunity. He launched a full-scale attack. It only took him 3 days to break through Lord Kassa's defense line and kill him in the chaos. The Silver Pegasus Legion paid a heavy price. Sasu sighed. I heard that less than 1/10 of the elves returned to Wild Willow City alive. And then, Han Jin asked. Nothing. Lord Kassa died. His territory was divided between Wild Willow City and Holy Crown City. That's it. Han Jin was silent. Morrison's and the others sighed. They finally understood what Sunir said. She had been harassing the enemy's rear for more than a year. The hardships and dangers she had experienced were unimaginable. Eating leather armor? Now it seemed too normal. What are you thinking? Sasu looked at Han Jin. What about Zagund? You didn't talk about him just now. Him? Kassa is dead. How can he fight against Wild Willow City and Holy Crown City? He has already fled back to his territory. Wild Willow City and Holy Crown City didn't chase after Black Raven City's army. No. Why? Well, I don't know. Sasu shook his head. What he knew was the general process and key links of the whole war. Not only him, but many others also knew. As for why, it was an internal secret. Chapter 39. While Morrison's and the others were still chatting, Han Jin hid in the woods. He didn't want to waste his time on idle chatter. Strictly speaking, he was much stricter than Morrison's and the others, and he put in much more effort. It was just that no one could tell that he was training. Han Jin pondered for a long time. His fingers slowly moved in the air, and a mist-like black light appeared at his fingertips. It then turned into a strange talisman. Han Jin let out a sigh of relief. He had absorbed more than a dozen black raven magic crystals. Although he could use the energy to control the dark elements and prevent them from affecting his body, he still felt uncomfortable. Now, he had finally expelled all the dark elements from his body. Seeing that the talisman had taken shape, Han Jin looked at Stillberg in the distance. He waved his right hand and shouted, "Go!" The air around Stillberg suddenly twisted, and 5 floating monsters appeared out of nowhere. They grabbed onto Stillberg's limbs and hair and dragged him into the air. "Help!" Stillberg let out an ear-piercing scream. "Spectre!" Morrison's roared and jumped up from the ground. His greatsword cut through a specter's body like lightning, but the specter didn't disappear. It just became thinner. Sasu chanted a spell in a low voice and raised his staff above his head. The sky suddenly lit up, and a twisted bolt of lightning shot down from the sky and hit a specter. Sasu's magic seemed to be much more powerful than Morrison's sword. The specter hit by the bolt of lightning instantly turned into a wisp of green smoke. The specter's scream before it died sent chills down everyone's spine. In fact, specters were monsters formed by the dark elements, so they couldn't scream. Rather than saying that they heard it, it was more like they felt it. Die! Morrison's jumped up from the ground for the second time. His combat power had undergone a strange change. The light was a bit blurry, and some extremely bright spots were shining on his body like stars. Han Jin stared at the battle in the distance, dumbfounded. What was this? What he used was obviously the 5 ghosts carrying spell. What was that thing called ghost? The key point of the 5 ghosts carrying spell was the word carrying. It could make something disappear from its original place and appear at a designated location. What kind of carrying spell was it? The remaining 4 specters didn't know how to fight back or dodge. With Sunir's help, they were all killed quickly. Morrison's caught Stillberg and threw Stillberg aside. The danger was gone, but Morrison's and the others still maintained their posture. Sunir was holding a bow in one hand and an arrow in the other. She was carefully listening to the sound around her. Sasu was holding his wand tightly. He was so nervous that he even held his breath. Only necromancers could command undead creatures like specters, and every necromancer was a powerhouse among powerhouses. Sorcerers could become sages, and there were 2 choices after that. One was to continue practicing traditional magic and become an archmage, and the other was to become a wizard. In other words, any sorcerer who could command specters was at least a 9th grade professional, which made them very nervous. Time passed by slowly. Morrison's and the others were as still as statues. Chi Li and Stillberg also knew that danger was coming, but there was nothing they could do. They could only hide in the corner and wait for their fate. After a long time, Moxink finally couldn't bear it anymore and roared, "Who is it? Who is it? Come out!" If it weren't for the fact that he was worried, he would have added the word "get out." The forest was still quiet. Sunir suddenly thought of something. She turned around and scanned the surroundings. Her eyesight was as good as her hearing. She saw Han Jin at first glance. Han Jin quickly leaned against a tree trunk and peeked his head out. He kept looking around, as if he was looking for the enemy in the dark. "It's okay," Sunir said slowly. "That guy should have left." "Left? Then why did he catch Stillberg?" Morrison's didn't believe it and shouted, "Don't hide. Come out." The surroundings were still quiet. There were 2 wolf howls in the distance, but it obviously had nothing to do with the wizard hiding in the dark. Is he really gone? Sasu couldn't understand. "Everyone, go do what you need to do." Sunir put away her bow and slowly walked towards Han Jin. Han Jin couldn't continue pretending. He looked at Sunir with his innocent eyes. "Did you do it?" Sunir wasn't so easily fooled. She went straight to the point and asked, "Don't deny it. Other than you, no one else here can use dark magic." Ha! Ha ha, it's really you? Sunir's expression became serious. This strange and mysterious prophet could not only use spells to increase spiritual force, but also control spirits. It was simply unimaginable. Sunir also knew that this person's strength was far inferior to that of a wizard. This shouldn't have happened. It's just a small accident. Han Jin looked at Morrison's and the others in the distance. He lowered his voice and said, I wanted to use a very mysterious spell. Who would have thought that it would turn into something like this? What kind of spell did you want to use? Sunir's shock couldn't be described with words. She could see that Han Jin was very dissatisfied with the spirits. This meant that the spell Han Jin wanted to use was more powerful than the spirits. It's hard to explain in a few words. Han Jin shook his head, and there are some things that I don't understand. Oh, Sunir muttered to herself. Don't do random experiments in the future. What if you hurt Stillberg just now? Don't worry, I care about him more than you do. Just now, I already said that it was just a small accident. Han Jin smiled bitterly. I don't mean anything else. Just be careful in the future. With that, Sunir looked deeply at Han Jin and turned to leave. Han Jin leaned against the tree trunk and crossed his arms in front of his chest. His mind was in a mess, but he could already make a judgment. In this world, all the charms that he used had changed. For example, the fire charm shouldn't have been so powerful, and the spirit refreshment charm shouldn't have been so effective. It was impossible that Sunir didn't allow him to experiment. He had to make a new evaluation of every spell. Otherwise, he could get himself killed in a dangerous situation. Sunir, Han Jin called out. Is there anything else? Sunir stopped in her tracks. Do you have any more grade 3 magic crystals? I want a fire element one. You can absorb the elements of a grade 3 magic crystal. Sunir was delighted. Chapter 40. Holding a few fire magic crystals, Han Jin walked to a more remote place. This was his habit. Firstly, he didn't want to be disturbed, and secondly, he didn't want others to discover his secret. After hesitating for a moment, Han Jin put 2 second-grade magic crystals into his mouth and put the 3rd-grade magic crystal into the cloth bag. He had tasted the lesson, and no one was willing to fall in the same place twice. Han Jin jumped onto a branch, found a place to sit, and closed his eyes. The energy in the magic crystals was released at an extremely fast speed and was absorbed at an extremely fast speed. Now, Han Jin's mental cultivation method was becoming more and more adept. After reaching the minor foundation stage, the energy storage location had been shifted from the lower Dantian to the middle Dantian, and the pure fire elements were all sent to the furnace in his lower Dantian. Darkness elements made people feel vexed, while fire elements gave him a very comfortable feeling. It was warm and gentle, just like the afterglow of the setting sun. Unfortunately, he had several 100-second tier darkness magic crystals, while the rest of the magic crystals were pitifully few. At this moment, Han Jin suddenly felt the tree trunk tremble violently. Was it an earthquake? He hurriedly concentrated his spirit and chi, guiding all the flowing energy into his middle Dantian, and then opened his eyes. A huge monster jumped into his eyes. To be precise, it was a giant bear. There was a hole in its left eye, and it was obviously blind. Its remaining right eye emitted a ferocious red light, making people shudder. If Sunir was here, she would immediately recognize that it was the earth bear that had attacked them. The giant bear's momentum was incomparably ferocious, just like a rampaging tank. However, compared to the group of magic beasts behind it, it was like a child in the presence of an adult. 7 or 8 magic beasts that looked like cows were chasing the giant bear. Although there weren't many of them, when they galloped, it was as if thousands of soldiers and horses were charging forward. They were unstoppable, and the trees and rocks along the way were all turned into fine powder under their charge. In this extremely dense forest, a path full of broken branches and broken stones was forcibly swept out by them. Just as Han Jin was in a daze, a wild bull suddenly rushed up from the side and caught up with the giant bear. Its 2-foot-long horns reached under the giant bear's belly and vigorously lifted it upwards. The galloping giant bear suddenly lost its balance, and under the effect of inertia, it tumbled forward for more than 20 meters before stopping. The calf in its mouth was also thrown far away and hit the ancient tree where Han Jin was, giving Han Jin a big fright. The giant bear was furious and stood up like a human, and then let out a deafening roar. The leaves within 100 meters all rustled, and all Han Jin immediately covered his ears. The wild bull that had succeeded was not afraid and rushed towards the giant bear. Its head was slightly lowered, and its 2-foot-long horns extended forward like sharp swords. Another deafening roar sounded, and the giant bear stretched out its fan-like paw and slapped down, hitting the head of the wild bull. With a bang, this paw actually slapped the head of the wild bull into the soil, and the body of the wild bull flew forward, drawing a semicircle in the air, and fell heavily on the ground with its back facing down. What a domineering strength! Han Jin was secretly speechless. If this paw had hit him, his height would have been sharply reduced to a few centimeters, and his whole body would have been turned into a pile of flesh and blood. In the next moment, a scene that made Han Jin dumbfounded appeared. The wild bull actually struggled to get up and swayed like a drunk man. It didn't die. Han Jin couldn't believe his eyes. The wild bulls behind had already rushed over, and under their fierce charge, the giant bear couldn't help but be knocked back, and several deep wounds were left on its abdomen and waist. Han Jin complained in his heart. He couldn't be bothered to watch this rare, fierce battle, and looked around, trying to find a way out. The center of the battle was less than 20 meters away from the tree he was hiding in, and it could shift to him at any time. When the city gate is on fire, the fish in the moat will suffer. However, he chose this place because the ancient tree under his feet was more isolated and had a wide field of vision. Now that he was in a hurry to hide in another tree, it was too difficult unless he walked under the tree. The problem was, did he have the courage to go down the tree? The battle between the two magical beasts was getting more and more intense. The giant bear was already surrounded, although it had the power to split mountains, and every time it waved its paw, it could make the bison tumble or even smash the bison to the ground. However, the bison's body was too tough. It would only take a moment for them to rejoin the battle as if nothing had happened. Perhaps it was unintentional, or perhaps it was on purpose, but one of the wild bulls attacked from behind the giant bear. Its sharp horns pierced the bottom of the giant bear's tail. The giant bear was in so much pain that its hair stood up like steel needles, and it turned around to give the despicable wild bull a slap, and the despicable wild bull was hit on its back. The giant bear was still angry and slapped the wild bull's belly again. With a bang, the wild bull's body bent in the middle, and its front and back hooves collided with each other. When its body stretched out again, blood was spurting out from its mouth and nose like spring water. The wild bull's 4 limbs trembled, and then it stopped moving. The magical beast's intelligence should be very limited. If a human warrior was stabbed by a sharp weapon, he would immediately move in the direction of the wound and would never turn around. Although the giant bear had successfully killed a wild bull, the wound under its tail had been torn open by itself, and what flowed out was not only blood, but also a section of intestines. In the roar, the giant bear stood up again, and both of its paws slapped the ground at the same time. Suddenly, a row of thick spikes emerged from the ground. Some spikes were more than 10 meters high, and the shortest ones were about 5 or 6 meters high. The herd of wild bulls, including the ones that had died in the battle, were all hit by the spikes and were pushed into the air. The red light in the giant bear's eyes dimmed a lot, and it turned around and fled to the place where Han Jin was hiding. Han Jin's heart was full of hatred. He only wanted to not be involved and did not want to affect the battle situation. When he saw the giant bear rushing over, his first thought was to jump down the tree and escape. But when he saw the intestines behind the giant bear, an idea came to his mind, and he pulled out a table knife. A cold light flashed across the sky, and the table knife pierced through the giant bear's intestines, nailing them to the ground. The giant bear didn't feel anything and continued to run forward. Suddenly, its intestines, which had been dragged for more than 10 meters, were pulled straight. Then, with a bang, the intestines flew into the air like a spirit snake. In an instant, the grass behind the giant bear's tail was dyed red by the blood that gushed out. The heart-wrenching pain made the giant bear go into a state of madness. It suddenly rushed forward and hit the lonely old tree. Han Jin was already prepared. The tip of his foot pushed off the branch, and his body jumped out, and then he threw out a wooden commander seal. Chapter 41. In the instant that the ancient tree collapsed, a giant appeared out of thin air. Hanjin tapped the giant's arm with the tip of his foot, and he landed safely on the ground. He didn't dare to stop for even a single moment as he ran into the distance. Meanwhile, the giant charged toward the earth bear, which was on the brink of death, and swung its fists downward. In reality, the earth bear was already on the brink of death, and it had no ability to retaliate. As such, it could only allow the giant to pummel it with its fists and feet. The spikes had already disappeared, and the bison fell to the ground one after another, sending grass and sand flying through the air. Only after a long while did they get to their feet in a daze. Even though the spikes were quite sharp, the hides of the bison were extremely thick. Only one of the bison's abdomen had been punctured, while the rest of the bison were completely unscathed. The bison were a little perplexed by the battle that had just taken place, and they slowly closed in. Hanjin saw that the bison weren't chasing after him, and he ran for another dozen or so meters before hiding behind a tree and summoning his wooden block over. That insufferably arrogant earth bear had already breathed its last. It was lying quietly in a pool of blood. A few bison formed a semicircle, and from time to time, they would let out deep cries. They would bump and stomp on the earth bear, treating it as a toy. Two of the bison ran over to the calf and licked it incessantly with their tongues. Unfortunately, the calf didn't respond. After a short while, one of the bison let loose a forlorn cry before turning around and slowly making its way into the forest. The other bison also abandoned the earth bear and followed behind it. What a waste! A wry smile appeared on Hanjin's face. Those bison had been extremely frenzied just then, and they were about to destroy everything in their path. Who would have thought that after the death of the earth bear, the bison would have suddenly transformed into a completely different beast? If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have wasted a wooden commander seal. Sunir jumped down from the tree branch, and Hanjin asked in a quiet voice, "What kind of magic beasts are those?" "Ironhide bulls, 7th tier magic beasts." Sunir looked at Hanjin from head to toe. "Are you all right? Magical beast of the 7th step?" Hanjin was stunned for a moment. As soon as he finished speaking, he had already rushed out and rushed to the giant bear. First, he kicked the giant bear. After waiting for a moment and making sure that there was no reaction, he turned around and shouted, "Sunir!" At this moment, Morrisons walked out from the other side and saw the earthen bear in front of Hanjin. He couldn't help but yell, "Sunir, isn't that the earthen bear that you shot blind?" "Yes." Sunir slowly walked over and looked at it for a moment. Then she smiled at Hanjin. "You should be very happy right now, right?" She knew that Hanjin could not only absorb elements from magic crystals, but also from meat. According to Hanjin, the higher the level of the magic beast, the more he could replenish. An 8th grade earth bear should be more effective than a low-level magic crystal. This is the bear of earth, an 8th grade magic beast? Hanjin's eyes flashed. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't talk nonsense. However, he was too excited right now, so he had to confirm it. "Yes." Sunir nodded. Morrison's University walked over and roared. Then, he pierced his sword into the earthen bear's chest. A moment later, a yellow magic crystal the size of half a fist appeared in front of everyone. Hanjin stared at the magic crystal without blinking. His heart was in turmoil. Energy. Morrison's had thousands of units of energy, which was already very impressive. The energy contained in this magic crystal could be calculated with Xian. As for how much energy it contained, he couldn't calculate it because the difference between him and the magic crystal was too great. Morrisons passed the magic crystal to Sunir. Sunir carefully took it and observed it for a moment. Then she smiled and said, "Even if we add up all our gains in this forest and multiply it by 10 times, it still wouldn't be as valuable as this magic crystal." "Yes, we are rich again." Morrisons laughed. "I really hope we can be rich every day." Sunir smiled and put the magic crystal into her space ring. Morrisons, think of a way to carry this bear of earth back. No need to go through so much trouble." Han Jin waved his hand. The motionless giant walked over and grabbed the bear of earth with his 2 hands. Then, he threw the bear of earth onto his shoulder. Sunir suddenly showed a surprised expression. She walked in front of the calf and stared at it for a moment. "This calf isn't dead yet. Then, let's take this calf back." "Wait." Sunir waved her hand. "Cast a spell on it." "What spell?" Han Jin was surprised. "The spell that you always cast for Morrison's." "What do you want to do?" Han Jin was a little reluctant. Even though Ironhide bulls are 7th-tier magic beasts, they aren't very aggressive and won't attack other magic beasts. Also, if there are calves that need to be taken care of, they won't continue to migrate. This means that we have a very good neighbor. Good in what way? If we encounter any magic beast that we can't handle in the future, we can lure them to the Ironhide bull's territory. Do you guys understand? Han Jin was a little skeptical. However, he knew that Sunir had a lot of experience in the jungle. Besides, a spirit refreshment spell only required 30 yuan of energy, so there was no need to take it too seriously. He drew a talisman in the air before waving his hand, upon which the talisman flew into the calf's body. The 3 of them waited for a long while, but the calf still didn't show any reaction. Sunir turned the calf over to find that there was a bone-deep gash on its neck. She heaved a faint sigh. "That's too bad." "Sunir, are you sure that these Ironhide bulls will benefit us greatly?" Han Jin asked in a slow voice. "Of course, as long as you can save it." "Then let me try." Han Jin began to draw a hand in the air, but this time his movements were very sluggish. The sacrificial material for spirit beasts was an intermediate-grade Taoist spell technique that cultivators often use to aid their spirit beasts in their cultivation or to treat their spirit beasts. Thankfully, Han Jin was a master of miscellaneous arts, so he knew a thing or two about almost all types of Taoist spells. Of course, whether or not he was going to develop in that direction was another matter altogether. The talisman was finally completed, and the strange runes that were visible to the naked eye hovered in the air while exuding a faint white light. Han Jin heaved a sigh of relief before waving a hand. "Go!" A dazzling light erupted from the talisman before enshrouding the calf within. After the white light dissipated, the calf's hooves suddenly trembled. "It's taking effect so quickly. You could have become a priest already." Sunir was ecstatic. "Morrison's, pick up the calf. Be gentle. I'll bandage its wounds." Han Jin shrugged. He hoped that Sunir was right. The sacrificial material for spirit beasts had cost him over 2,000 yuan of energy, and he didn't want to make a loss. Chapter 42. At dawn, Moxink yawned and got up. He was still a little tired after practicing swordsmanship for a whole day. But then again, he had no one to teach him any fighting skills. Now that he had mastered the basic skills of fighting skills, it would be wrong if he didn't hurry up and practice them. Moxink thought to himself. Moxink didn't know what to do. Morrison's believed that he had some perseverance. Others could say that he was stupid, reckless, and aggressive, but no one could say that he was lazy. Morrison's suddenly smelled a strong aroma when he walked out of the wooden hut. He looked around and saw Han Jin eating something by the campfire. Morrison smiled and sat beside Han Jin. He reached out to grab the barbecued meat on the wooden rack. A vine lashed out and hit Morrison's on the hand. He was unlucky. His mind was still not fully awake, and the vine was too fast for him to dodge. Moxink turned his head abruptly and glared at Sunir. But Sunir's eyes were even angrier than his. She curled her lips at Han Jin. Morrison's finally noticed that Han Jin was a little different. He was stunned for a moment. Then he ran to the front of Han Jin to get a better look. Han Jin's face was radiating an indescribable glow. He was like a businessman who loved money as much as his life seeing a mountain of gold. He was like a pervert who got his wish fulfilled and obtained the most beautiful woman in the world. He was not only excited, but also happy and satisfied. There were many other things that could not be described. Han Jin had enough reason to be excited. Sunir said yesterday that the value of the magic crystal was almost 10 times the value of all the harvests in the forest. The energy he absorbed from the earthen bear was far more than what he had accumulated since his rebirth. If he had to compare it to the other world, it was like he had eaten 100-year-old ginseng. Hanjin was so focused on absorbing the energy that he did not see Sunir whipping Morrison's, nor did he pay attention to Morrison's movements. His eyes and heart were only focused on the energy. Morrison's, this is for you. Michel came over with a basket made of rattan. Moxing stood up and sat aside. He took over the basket, which was full of pheasant eggs. They should have been roasted in the fire, because the eggshells were cracked and covered with ashes. Moxing didn't care about it. He picked up an egg, peeled it, and threw it into his mouth. Sasu walked out of the wooden hut and sat beside Hanjin. Ever since Hanjin could release magic to help them train, their attitude toward Hanjin had changed. They liked to get close to Hanjin whenever they could. Sit here if you don't want to be beaten, Morrison said with a fake smile. Huh? Why are you beating me? Sasu asked in confusion. Luckily, he had a good temper. If it were Morrison's, he would definitely yell, I'm sitting here. Who dares to beat me? Don't say I didn't warn you. Morrison's smile became more cunning. However, his cunning was limited. Otherwise, he would have pretended not to know and waited until Sasu was beaten up. Sunir poked Sasu with the tip of her foot. Sasu turned around and looked at Sunir. He sensed something and moved closer to Morrison's. You didn't come when I asked you to. What's wrong now? Why don't you go back? Morrison's was starting to regret his words. I'm too lazy to talk to you. Sasu reached out and grabbed an egg. Morrison's was the kind of person who could not live without arguing with someone. He was about to retort when he suddenly saw something. He yelled in surprise, That little thing, is it really alive? The calf was lying on a patch of dry grass. It was moving its limbs from time to time. Even though it could not stand up or eat, it was obvious that its injuries were slowly recovering. Raphael's magic is amazing, Sunir said softly. Morrison's and Sasu exchanged glances. They turned around and looked at Hanjin. Sunir was right. The kid was indeed amazing. At this time, Chi Li and Stillbird were awakened by the voices outside. They walked out of the wooden shed and were called to the other side. Hanjin was enjoying the roast meat alone, while the others were sharing a basket of eggs. It was more or less a little oppressive. However, Morrison's and Sasu were smart. They knew that Sunir must have her reasons for letting Hanjin eat alone. Of course, they did not mind. Miss Keeley had always had an inferiority complex because she had hardly contributed anything to the group. It was already good enough for her to eat for free. As for Steelberg, he would even be willing to let Hanjin take the pheasant eggs and starve him, not to mention watching Hanjin eat alone. By the time Hanjin finished the roast meat, everyone had finished eating and chatted for a long time. Seeing Hanjin stand up, his expression returned to normal. Morrison's hurriedly stood up and greeted him. He pointed at himself with a smile. After a month of repetition, it was no longer a matter of tacit understanding between them. It was a matter of procedure. Hanjin casually drew a charm of spirit refreshment and waved his hand. Go! The charm turned into a white light and entered between Morrison's eyebrows. Morrison's University asked curiously, Why are you so happy today? Because I'm in a good mood today. Hanjin smiled. Morrison's was speechless. He did not dare to argue with Hanjin now. If he angered Hanjin and deliberately made things difficult for him, he would be the one to suffer. He had to bow his head when it was time, but when could he raise his head again? If he wanted to continue training, he would need Hanjin's help. Unless he became a sword saint, that was too far away. I don't need it. Sasu saw Hanjin's gaze fall on him. He smiled and waved his hand. Last night, I figured out a few key problems. I'll try to open the space in the space ring later. Are you confident? Hanjin asked. The space ring was very important to him. Some charms could not be stored for long periods of time. They could only be created and used on the spot. The space ring could solve this problem. He and Sunir had experimented with it and had been verified. I should be able to, Sasu replied. Hanjin smiled. Sasu was very steady, to the point of being conservative. He would not make promises easily. It seems like you've gained a lot, Sunir said in a low voice. How should I put it? Hanjin paused. It's a surprise. Today's recommendation ticket is very, very important to me. Brothers, please be kind and give me the recommendation ticket with a few clicks of the mouse. I don't even dare to sleep now. I'm afraid that when I wake up, my book will have disappeared from the new book list without trace. The ticket. Chapter 43. Noon arrived in the blink of an eye, and Han Jin emerged from the wooden shed. He appeared to be in very good spirits, which was also the effect of the initial foundation establishment stage. Even though he hadn't slept the entire night, he only needed to rest for a short while to recover his energy. Come here. Sunir waved a hand. Can you help it one more time? Isn't it fine already? Han Jin was a little reluctant as he made his way over to Sunir and squatted down beside her. The little bull lying on the haystack had already opened its eyes, and it was looking at Han Jin with a hint of longing and curiosity in its eyes. Han Jin knew that this was the effect of the spirit beast sacrifice material. However, he didn't have a good impression of ironhide bulls. They were too ugly and dirty, and aside from those legendary old men, no one would be willing to ride them around. You. Sunir shook her head with a resigned expression as she said, You have to trust me. If we can win the trust of those ironhide bulls, it'll be very beneficial to us. What if we can't? Or perhaps those ironhide bulls have always been hostile toward us. Why don't you think positively? I'm used to it. Han Jin smiled. I always think about the worst possible outcome, then work toward the best outcome. Sunir was a little stunned as she turned to Han Jin with an earnest expression. Right at this moment, Sasu strode over to them with an elated expression. Raphael, give me your hand. Han Jin's heart jolted violently upon hearing this. Had he succeeded? He slowly extended his right hand towards Sasu, and in the next instant, an antiquated ring appeared in his palm. Put on, Sasu said with a smile. Han Jin slowly slid the ring onto his index finger. All of a sudden, he was struck by a sense of connection, as if the ring had a body of its own. Or rather, it was an extension of his body. Sasu began to chant an incantation in a low voice, and a ball of faint white light enshrouded Han Jin's entire left hand. He then smiled and said, Give it a try and see if you can open up a spatial rift. Han Jin focused his consciousness on the ring, and a strange yet pure spatial rift suddenly appeared before his eyes. In reality, the term rift was a misnomer as he couldn't pinpoint the exact location of this spatial rift. When he focused his attention in front of him, the spatial rift was right in front of him, and when he focused his attention behind him, the spatial rift was right in front of him. Strange. Han Jin's eyes. You've opened up a spatial rift? Cessation said enviously. Just now, it took me a lot of willpower to resist the temptation. He's been waiting for this day for a whole month. If you really, he'll fight you to the death. Sunir couldn't help but laugh. Ha! Sasu laughed. He wasn't joking. If it weren't for the influence of friendship, future, and other factors, what he said just now would have already become a fact. Han Jin didn't pay attention to what Sasu was saying. He turned around and yelled, Stillberg, bring me those black raven magic crystals. Yes, young master. Stillberg answered and ran over with a bag in his hand. Han Jin poured out all the magic crystals in the bag onto the ground. He hesitated for a moment and said, Sasu, do I need to chant an incantation? Sunir had never chanted an incantation before, and neither had George the other day. However, he didn't know what he should do. No need. Use your power of the will. You should know about power of the will, right? Sasu replied. Han Jin nodded. When he transferred his mind to the magic crystals, the position of the spatial rift changed. The moment the two overlapped, all the magic crystals disappeared and were transferred to the spatial rift. Han Jin didn't know what he was using to observe the scene in the spatial rift, but he was sure that it wasn't his vision. The magic crystals were piled up together, and the magic crystals below were blocked. However, he could still see the shape of each magic crystal. And then, how do I take the magic crystals out? Use your power of the will to lock onto the magic crystal you want to take out. Han Jin paused. A magic crystal appeared out of thin air and rolled onto the grass. Han Jin suddenly revealed a puzzled expression. That's not right. The guy named George took out everything in the spatial rift at once. Is his power of the will that strong? It's very easy. You just have to close the spatial rift, and everything will naturally come out. Sasso laughed. And this is your first time using the spatial rift. You're not familiar with it yet. Controlling the spatial rift is different from releasing magic. In fact, you can control it with just a little bit of power of the will. Even ordinary people can do it. With a crash, hundreds of magic crystals fell onto the grass. Han Jin smiled. Interesting, when Morrison's dragged his tired body back, he saw Han Jin having a lot of fun. Whoosh! The magic crystals disappeared. Whoosh! The magic crystals reappeared. Morrison's revealed a look of surprise and joy. Sasu, you did it? Amazing! After saying that, he gave Sasu a thumbs up. What am I? Sasu glanced at Han Jin. Did you see that? If it were me, my power of the will would have dried up long ago. Sunir put her hand to her forehead and said helplessly, when I first got the spatial rift, I was very interested in it, but I only played with it for a short while. He's really... Morrison's turned his attention to Han Jin. After looking for a while, he was speechless. How long has he been playing with it? If I add up all the magic crystals I saw, there should be hundreds of thousands of them. Sasu shook his head. No, I'm dizzy. Whoosh whoosh. Han Jin took in and out the magic crystals faster and faster. In the end, as soon as the magic crystals appeared in the air and before they began to fall, Han Jin put them back into the spatial rift. Then they reappeared in their original places like stars twinkling. Sunir's expression changed slightly. Apart from Han Jin, she was the only one who had used the spatial rift. Thus, she knew better than anyone how difficult it was to do so. Sir, it's time to eat. Michel, who had been busy for half a day, called out loudly. Han Jin was awakened. He put all the magic crystals into the spatial rift and stood up. You guys eat first. I have something to do. You're not eating? Morrison's University was shocked. To him, it was not strange if the sky fell and the earth cracked, but Han Jin was not eating. Was the world about to be destroyed? Yes. Han Jin nodded and strode into the wooden shed. He put the various kinds of animal skins he had cut into the spatial rift and walked out into the depths of the forest, leaving a few dumbfounded people staring at his back. Chapter 44. Han Jin quickly absorbed the energy of the 3 black raven magic crystals. After a moment of hesitation, he drew a charm in the air. It was the 5 ghosts carrying spell. He had no other choice. The magic crystals of other elements were limited, but there were hundreds of dark element magic crystals. He could only think of a solution in this aspect. The dark element provided by the 3 black raven magic crystals was not enough. Adding the previous accumulation, he could at most cast a 5 ghosts carrying spell or a soul-chasing spell. However, he had no place to experiment with the latter. He could not use Morrison's and the others as targets. Besides, this world was too strange. The soul-chasing spell attacked the 3 souls and 7 spirits. Han Jin was very doubtful of the effectiveness of the soul-chasing spell. Han Jin targeted a rock. He waved his hand and shouted, "Go!" 5 floating monsters appeared out of thin air and surrounded the rock. Together, they lifted the rock and floated back to Han Jin. With a plop, they threw the rock to the ground. Han Jin was stunned for a while. He sighed helplessly. It seemed that the 5 ghosts carrying spell was really useless. All his previous ideas had gone up in smoke. Catch a magical beast alive to test the soul-chasing spell? Han Jin pondered. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the air had become cold. The 5 ghosts in front of him were emitting a strong dark aura, which annoyed him. However, as soon as this thought flashed through his mind, the 5 ghosts retreated more than 20 meters away. They floated there motionlessly. Han Jin was stunned. After a moment, he tentatively waved his hand. The 5 ghosts floated back to him and floated in front of him. Han Jin reached out his hand and touched the body of one of the ghosts with his fingertip. He then slowly reached his hand in. A sticky feeling came from his fingertip. He stirred a big circle with his finger. When he took his finger out, the ghost returned to its original state, as if it was not affected at all. Waving his hand, going again, waving his hand, coming again. The 5 ghosts responded accurately to Han Jin's thoughts like well-trained soldiers. There were no eyes on the mist-like bodies, but Han Jin knew that the 5 ghosts were looking at him and sensing him. Han Jin fixed his eyes on an ancient tree. At the same time, the 5 ghosts rushed up and hit the trunk crazily with their bodies. Their long arms, whose fingers couldn't be seen clearly, kept waving. The trunk trembled violently, and leaves fell down like raindrops. I'm not disturbing you, am I? Morrison's voice came from the bushes behind him. Morrison's was exhausted after morning's practice. He came to Han Jin to come over. If Han Jin was practicing, he would naturally ignore him. Morrison's had to admit that he came at the wrong time. When Morrison's walked out of the bushes, he saw the 5 ghosts flying towards him. He was stunned for a moment and shouted, "Damn!" He reached out his hand for his sword, but it was empty. He panicked and bent down to pick up a stone from the ground. He threw it forward with all his might, then turned and ran. Although ghosts were not very strong, they were very troublesome, especially for warriors who could not use their fighting skills. Once they were entangled, they would be finished. They could not be torn apart, and they could not be dragged away. Attacking them was the same as attacking oneself. If he had a sword, he might be able to resist, but now he could only run. The ghosts flew faster than Morrison's. In just a moment, the distance between them was less than 3 meters. Morrison's was brave. Seeing that there was no way to escape, he roared and threw a punch at one of the ghosts. Moxink's Star River fighting chi, which was close to the primary level, was indeed powerful. His punch tore a big hole in the ghost's body. The problem was that the ghost's body was between virtual and real. When Moxink's fist went through the ghost's body went through the ghost's body at the same time, and then it hugged Moxink's head. The other 4 ghosts rushed up and surrounded Moxink. Moxink roared angrily and tried to break free, but it was not easy for him to get rid of the entanglement of the ghosts. He was surrounded by 5 ghosts all the time. Sunir and Sasu rushed over. Sasu was shocked. Just as he was about to chant a spell, Sunir waved at him. "Help me." Morrison's panicked. However, the 5 ghosts suddenly left him and flew to the top of the tree, then stopped there. Then, Han Jin walked out from behind the tree. "Okay, that day it was also you." Morrison suddenly understood and said with anger. In fact, he was just pretending to hide his true thoughts. He was shocked because Han Jin had given him too many surprises in the past few days. "I just wanted to do an experiment. I didn't hurt you, did I?" Han Jin was a little embarrassed. "It's not fair. You let a puppet bully me. Now you summon ghosts to bully me. Why don't you look for him?" Morrison's finger almost poked Sasua's nose. "You came here by yourself, didn't you?" Han Jin laughed. Morrison's was angry. He looked at the ghosts on the tree and yelled, "Ask them to come down." Just one of them will do." Han Jin waved his hand, and a ghost floated down from the tree and floated in front of Morrison's. Morrison's took a step back. Seeing that the ghost didn't move and the other ghost didn't react, he was emboldened. He went up and punched the ghost's chest. The dazzling combat aura created a big hole in the ghost's body. The ghost's body became a little blurry. Morrison's punched the ghost twice. The ghost couldn't take the damage from the combat aura and disappeared into a puff of green smoke. Comfortable. Moxink heaved a sigh of relief, showing a vile expression. "What's the level of a ghost?" Han Jin asked. "You don't know? Then how did you summon them?" Sasu opened his eyes wide. "My magic is a little special." Cessation opened his mouth, but swallowed back his words. He wanted to ask if he could learn it, but the fact that Han Jin was able to summon ghosts with his strength, which had never appeared on the mainland, meant that there must be some secret inheritance. Cessation shouldn't ask, and he couldn't ask. "3rd or 4th level," Sunir said softly. Han Jin calculated in his mind. About 6 black raven magic crystals were enough to cast the 5 wraiths transferring spell. This meant that he could make more than 40 charms and summon more than 200 ghosts. "Understood." Han Jin nodded. "If I can summon more than 200 ghosts, How powerful would I be? More than 200 ghosts? Sunir was surprised at first, but then she smiled and said, "You can defeat Morrison's a dozen times. You think you can deal with more than 200 ghosts?" Morrison's said angrily. "I can run away," Sunir said calmly. "Run away?" Morrison's was discouraged. He muttered, "You only know how to run away. You used to be a commander." Chapter 45. Time flew by, and autumn arrived in the blink of an eye. The emerald-green forest gradually turned yellow, and the world was filled with a sense of desolation. Hanjin stood on top of a small hill and looked down quietly. It had been 4 months since he left the 11th town. He had been steadily cultivating, and his total energy level was now close to 30 jia. By the standards of this world, he could be considered a level 4 professional. The speed of his progress had stunned Morrison's, Sunir, and the others. Of course, there was still a big gap between him and Morrison's. Most of Han Jin's confidence came from the collection in his space ring. Since the day Sasu gave him the restored space ring, Han Jin had become a collector. He had stored more than a dozen fire and thunder talismans in his space ring, more than 40 talismans of the 5 ghosts carrying spell, and 7 wooden army talismans, which were more than enough to deal with ordinary battles. Morrison stood beside Han Jin. He was tall and burly, like an immovable mountain. Ever since he had mastered the galaxy fighting technique, he had become a lot calmer than before. He even had a sense of, "I'm a powerful fighter." Of course, this was just an illusion. Once he relaxed, he would always do something that made people speechless. At the foot of the hill, a few ironhide bulls were leisurely nibbling on grass. In a few days, this herd of ironhide bulls would migrate to the south. They only liked to eat grass and green leaves, and had no interest in the withered forest. The calf that Han Jin had saved was growing very fast. It had only been 3 months, but it was already almost 1 meter tall. It was also very active. It would rush up the hill, and when it saw that no one was paying attention to it, it would turn around and rush down again. It would chase butterflies on the side of the road, and sometimes it would step on beetles crawling on the ground. It just wouldn't stop for a moment. During this period of time, the herd of ironhide bulls had made great contributions. In the past, Sunir and the others had never dared to provoke herds of magical beasts. However, with the help of the ironhide bulls, it was no longer a problem. They would always injure a few magical beasts before luring the enraged magical beasts to this place, and the ironhide bulls would act as the vanguard. The calf had played an important role. Perhaps it was because it had been modified by a spirit beast sacrifice talisman, but it looked down on other magical beasts. Perhaps it was because it had almost been killed by an earthen bear when it was very young, so it had a deep-seated hatred for all magical beasts that, whenever it saw a magical beast, it would be the first to attack, triggering the entire herd of ironhide bulls. Giant ironhide bulls. Of course, when the ironhide bulls, Sunir and Morrison's would never stand by and watch. Of course, the ironhide bulls. Of ironhide. Why hasn't Sunir come back yet? Could something have happened to her? Han Jin asked with furrowed brows. Sunir said that there are no more high-tier magical beasts nearby, so she wants to go somewhere further away today. Morrison scratched his head. Perhaps she went too far away. She should be back by now. Han Jin looked up at the sky to find that it was already past noon. At this moment, a shout came from far. A moment later, Sunir jumped out from the hillside on the opposite side of the hill. She turned around, drew her longbow, and shot an arrow, and then ran down the hillside. 2 tall and broad figures appeared. They were very strange in appearance, as if they were 2 walking tree trunks. Regardless of whether it was their limbs or the bark that covered their bodies, they could all be described as craggy, 8th-tier magical beast tree demons. And there were 2 of them. Han Jin was given a fright. However, compared to Sunir, the tree demon's movements were clearly very slow. Sunir ran with ease before stopping and drawing her longbow again. The 2 tree demons' bodies were already riddled with arrows, making them appear as if they were 2 giant targets. The herd of raging bulls gathered together in an uneasy manner. The leader of the herd, the iron-hide bull, let loose a low roar, seemingly to be warning the two tree demons. The two tree demons immediately stopped upon hearing the raging bull's roar. Even though iron-hide bulls were herbivorous magical beasts, they had sturdy leather armor, ferocious charging ability, and sharp horns. Furthermore, they always traveled in packs, which struck fear into the hearts of the vast majority of magical beasts. Sunir stopped in place and slowly drew her longbow with a lazy expression. She seemed to be taunting the tree demons, but at the same time, she also seemed to be provoking them. She loosened her fingers, and an arrow shot forth like lightning, striking one of the tree demons squarely in the body. The tree folk trembled and strode towards Sunir. In fact, the tree folk's hunting ability was very poor, and its movement ability was even worse. It could only wait for the prey to come. It would use its appearance to make the holy animals lose their vigilance, and when the holy animals approached it, it would launch an attack. The claws of tree demons were composed of countless root-like branches. They were soft yet tough, and they were riddled with barbed spikes. These barbed spikes could puncture the bodies of magical beasts, thereby allowing them to suck their blood. The most fearsome aspect of tree demons lay in their claws. If one was struck by a tree demon, they would be completely immobilized. The raging bull's breathing gradually accelerated and began to run faster and faster toward the two tree demons. Seeing as the tree demons had ignored their warnings and were forcing their way into their territory, the raging bulls immediately rushed toward the raging bull. One of the iron-hide bulls left the group and caught up to the raging bull before crashing into it, causing it to tumble to the ground. The raging bull let loose a cry of displeasure as it struggled to get up. However, the iron-hide bull was far too shameless. It crouched down and pressed half of its body onto the raging bull's stomach. The raging bull kicked around in a frenzy, sending grass and dirt flying through the air, but it was unable to get up no matter how hard it tried. Sunir was already familiar with the battle strategy. She opened up a path for the raging bulls before retreating and luring the two tree demons down the slope. The two tree demons had been locked in battle with Sunir for a long time, and they were completely enraged by Sunir, so they immediately chased after her. The iron-hide bulls were finally enraged by the tree demons' insistence on venturing deep into their territory. These magical beasts were normally very docile, but they would erupt with an unrelenting battle intent if they were threatened. The leading iron-hide bull gradually picked up speed, and in the end, the entire herd of iron-hide bulls became an unstoppable tide. Their bodies weighed several thousand kilograms, causing the earth to tremor as they stomped on the ground. Their horns were glowing with a cold light as they pointed toward the trance up ahead. Compared to wolves, raging bulls didn't know what to do. After all, they weren't carnivorous magical beasts, so they couldn't understand hunting techniques. They only knew how to unleash their most ferocious power in the shortest amount of time possible. Chapter 46. In reality, there weren't that many high-rank magic beasts on the outskirts of the forest. Otherwise, Sunir wouldn't have had to travel so far to find magic beasts. Direct conflict between iron-hide bulls and treants was even rarer. They were only guided by instincts and instincts. As such, the iron-hide bulls were quite nervous in the face of treants, as they were of a higher rank than them. The treants had stopped in their tracks because there were simply too many iron-hide bulls. If there were only 2 or 3 iron-hide bulls, the treants would have swaggered toward them a long time ago. The two treants faltered slightly at the sight of the unstoppable tide of ashen light hurtling toward them. They extended their arms, and countless branches wriggled and extended in a frenzy like peacocks fanning their tails in an attempt to intimidate their opponents. Unfortunately, iron-hide bulls were very stubborn. If they did, there was nothing that could stop them aside from death. Either they would die, or their enemies would die. The two treants were rather flustered upon seeing that their intimidation was ineffective. They continued to wave their arms through the air as they retreated. However, their speed was pitifully slow. Moments later, the ironhide bull in the lead had already caught up to them, and its sharp horns crashed directly toward one of the tree ants. Of course, the tree monster wasn't going to just sit there and wait for its death. Its claws struck the ironhide bull first, and clumps of branches instantly bound the ironhide bull tightly. However, the inertia created by its body, which weighed several thousand kilograms, was simply too great. The ironhide bull had already pounced forward, and its sharp horns had pierced deeply into the tree monster's body. The tree ant convulsed with pain, and its other claw struck the ironhide bull at the same time. At this moment, the other ironhide bulls had already caught up to it. A string of resounding booms rang out, and the treant's body began to sway violently like a lone boat in a stormy sea. However, during battle, tree demons would always plunge their lower limbs deep into the ground. In terms of stability, no living creature could compare with them. Even though the ironhide bulls were extremely ferocious, they were only able to break some of their lower limbs. It was virtually impossible for them to send the tree demons flying. Thus, a chaotic battle ensued. Several ironhide bulls surrounded two tree ants and engaged in a fierce battle. In terms of offensive prowess, the tree ants were far inferior to the earth bears. Tree ants relied on their large numbers of branches to tie down and kill their opponents, while the ironhide bulls had extremely sturdy leather armor, so they weren't afraid of thorns at all. After losing their momentum, they would at most be immobilized by the thorns. If the tree ants wanted to tie them down, then they would rather starve to death. Each tree spirit had 2 claws, but there were 6 ironhide bulls engaged in battle. 2 of the ironhide bulls were attacking the tree spirit at all times, and the tree spirit could only take the brunt of the attacks. Meanwhile, the other ironhide bulls were struggling with all their might. The situation was very clear from the very beginning. The tree spirits were at an absolute disadvantage. They couldn't kill their enemies, and they couldn't escape, either. It was only a matter of time. Even if their opponent was the earth bear, the tree spirits wouldn't be in such a passive position. They would use all of their branches to tie down the earth bear, then engage in a battle of attrition. Morrison's led the way while Hanjin followed behind. The 2 of them rushed forward, and a little ironhide bull suddenly began to struggle. It yelled incessantly at Hanjin, as if it were begging Hanjin to help it. However, Hanjin ignored it. Instead, he ran past less than 3 meters away from it. The little ironhide bull lay on the ground in disappointment as it stared blankly at Hanjin's departing figure. Moments later, Hanjin, Morrison's, and Sunir reunited. Hanjin looked on at the battle up ahead with a smile and said, "Looks like we don't have to do anything. You just love to slack off." Sunir chuckled. The tree spirit's defensive prowess wasn't as freakish as that of the ironhide bulls, but it was still quite powerful. After losing momentum, the ironhide bull's horns were unable to stab into their bodies, and they could only scratch against the thick bark of the trees. However, they could only stab once or twice, but no one would be able to take it if this went on for too long. It was like stabbing someone with a needle. Stabbing someone once wouldn't inflict any damage, but stabbing someone with hundreds of needles in the same spot was no different from stabbing someone with a knife. The tree spirit's bark began to peel off, and green sap continued to seep out from within. They were in extreme pain, and they used their claws to tie down the ironhide bulls. However, the freed ironhide bulls immediately began to unleash new attacks. At most, they were only able to shift the location of their wounds, but that didn't affect the battle at all. Hanjin and the others appeared to be very relaxed. In particular, Hanjin was sitting on the grass as if he were watching a movie. Sometimes, he really was very lazy, but he had the potential to benefit from everyone. If he could benefit from sitting down, why should he work so hard? After what seemed like an eternity, the tree spirit's resistance became more and more feeble. Morrison's picked up his giant sword with a sinister smile on his face. "Now it's time for me to show my might." Hanjin couldn't help but roll his eyes. Ever since Morrison's had mastered battle techniques, he had gradually developed a tendency to worship himself, and he would often say things like, "Let me decide everything." Or, "Dirty bastard, let me show you what a true battle technique is." Piss off, piss off. Han Jin said in a resigned manner. Morrison's chuckled incessantly. Just as Han Jin was used to his arrogance, he was also used to Han Jin's rudeness. However, a sharp light suddenly flashed through his eyes, and he locked his gaze onto one of the tree spirits. He then sprang forward in a straight line. A ball of murky battle energy erupted from Morrison's body. In the next instant, Morrison's had already leaped into the air and slashed his longsword down. As he slashed his longsword through the air, a vast expanse of light was unleashed, within which were countless specks of starlight. It was as if a dazzling galaxy had descended into the mortal realm. Without any sound, the upper half of the tree spirit's body flew into the air for over a dozen meters, while the lower half of its body quickly withered away. Morrison's landed firmly on the ground and turned his head slightly to look at another tree spirit. The tree spirit immediately began to panic. It used the last of its strength to fling the two trapped ironhide bulls away before retreating in a panicked manner. However, it shouldn't have retracted its foot. It was completely exhausted and riddled with wounds, and it was unable to maintain its balance. The ironhide bulls immediately rammed into it, and the other ironhide bulls that had regained their freedom all swarmed toward the tree spirit, treating it like a toy. They stomped on it and rammed into it, and in the end, the tree spirit was forced to roll down the slope. Morrison's leaped into the air again and chased after the tree spirit. Under a burst of dazzling starlight, the tree spirit was sliced in half. The cloud of battle energy fell onto the grassy ground before instantly disappearing. However, only those with the best eyesight would be able to see that all of the grass and roots within the area enshrouded by the battle energy had been riddled with holes. Chapter 47. It was almost dusk when Han Jin and the other two came back. Sasu was surprised. "Why did you come back so late?" "Sunir found 2 trans today," Morrison said with a bandit look. He then gave a thumbs up. "I killed them both. We got a lot today." Sasu laughed. "Sasu, change the magic crystal on your magic staff." Han Jin turned his hand and handed over a yellow magic crystal. "You didn't want to give it to us before, but now we have 4 grade, 8 magic crystals. There's no point in keeping so many." 3 months ago, after the Earth Bear was killed, the first thing Sunir and Morrison's did was to find a young bear cub and kill it easily. With today's harvest, they now had 4 grade, 8 magic crystals. "I want a fire-type one." Sasu shook his head. "Let's keep it." At this moment, a violent cough came from the wooden shed. Han Jin was surprised. "What happened to Chi Li?" "She's sick," Sasu said in a low voice. "Why did she suddenly get sick?" "She insisted on taking a bath. It's so cold." Sasu paused and smiled bitterly. "She fell sick when she came back." "Yes, the weather is getting colder," Sunir murmured. Living in the forest was fine for a short period of time, but for a long time, it was not poetic at all. There were difficulties everywhere. For example, the problem of living was not something that could be solved by building a few wooden sheds. The weather was getting colder, and they had nothing to keep warm. Should they put hay on it? They had to take the hay out to dry every day. If it didn't dry for a day, the hay would become moist and not warm at all. Should they put animal skins on it? Those things were extremely smelly. Han Jin couldn't stand it. Sunir and Chi Li couldn't stand it either. They also attracted insects. If Han Jin didn't need them to make magic scrolls, they would have thrown them away long ago. Food was also a problem. They ate barbecued meat every day, which made them dizzy. Occasionally, they would find some eggs of magical beasts, which would make them happy for a while. If Sunir came back with some wild fruits, everyone would go crazy. Even the timid Michelle and Stillbird would try their best to fight for them. The saddest thing was that no one was willing to swallow the fruits. They had to eat them slowly. To put it bluntly, if the forest was really as good as the poet said, why would humans crowd into towns and cities to live? "What should we do?" Cessation asked in a low voice. "Maybe we should find a place to replenish our arrows." Sunir said, "My arrows are running out." "Where are we going?" "We'll talk about it later. Let's go see how Chi Li is doing first," Han Jin said. He then walked to the wooden shed first. Chi Li was buried in the hay, only half of her head sticking out. Every time she coughed, the hay would shake violently, as if there was a monster hiding in it. Hanjin walked to Chi Li's side. He crouched down and touched Chi Li's forehead with his right hand. It was a little hot. Chi Li felt someone touching her and opened her eyes in a daze. Hanjin reached his hand into the hay and grabbed Chi Li's wrist. Chi Li was very surprised. Her already red face turned even redder. What are you doing? Don't move. Hanjin checked her pulse and said softly, "It's okay. It's just a small problem. You know how to treat illnesses, too?" Sunir asked in surprise. Hanjin smiled. He wasn't called a master of miscellaneous arts for nothing. Although cultivators didn't need to learn talismans to treat illnesses, because it was impossible for them to get sick after they built their foundation, Hanjin just happened to have learned a little about it. A talisman took shape in the air. Hanjin flicked his index finger, and the talisman sank into Chi Li's forehead. "Ah!" Chi Li cried out in surprise. Hanjin's talisman had an immediate effect. In just a moment, Chi Li felt a cool feeling spread from her head to her limbs. "Well, now let's talk about where to go," Hanjin said. Everyone looked at each other. The same question had been lingering in their minds for a long time. Hanjin could release fire magic, which meant he was a magician. Hanjin could use magic to improve their spiritual power, physical strength, endurance. And now he could cure illnesses, which meant he was a priest. Hanjin could release puppets to fight, which meant he was a puppet master. Hanjin could summon ghosts out of thin air, which meant he was a summoner. Morrison's once said that Hanjin was a prophet. So many professions overlapped in one person, it was hard not to be confused. "Hey, what are you thinking?" Hanjin raised his voice. "Ahem." Sassu coughed dryly. "Anyway, we can't go to Radon Town. The war won't end in such a short time, and Radon Town is too small to meet our wishes. We can't go to the west city of the Bite Man either. Last time we killed those knight. Things won't end like this. We should be wanted criminals. Maybe we will be attacked as soon as we show up." "Then where do you want to go?" Morrison's asked. "First of all, the place we want to go must have a large market, because we have to sell our trophies and buy a large number of low-grade magic crystals." Sassu thought for a moment and continued. "Also, Morrison's sword should be repaired. Sunir, if you have magic arrows, your fighting power should be improved a lot, right?" Sunir nodded. "That place can't be too far away. At least we can walk there in 20 days. The weather is getting colder and colder. It's not a pleasant thing to travel in the whistling north wind." Cessation pondered for a while and said, "Moreover, that place should be orderly and fair. Foreigners should not be bullied at will. I don't think anyone would want what happened in Bite Man to happen again." Morrison's face suddenly became gloomy, and he said word by word, "You mean Isolated Cliff City?" "Yes, Isolated Cliff City." "No, never." Morrison's jumped up as if he got an electric shock. "Even if you kill me, I won't go there." "Why?" Sassu asked in astonishment. "I escaped from there." "Don't ask, I won't go there anyway." "You have enemies there?" "Not really, but—" Morrison's face was a little red, and he scratched his head awkwardly. "Well, how about we go back to the west city of the Bite Man? If you are afraid, we could go to the south city." "Don't be silly. Even though the 4 cities of the Bite Man are fighting against each other, criminals who break the rules are not welcome no matter where they go," Sunir said calmly. "How can you blame us?" Morrison's yelled. "They bullied us first. They don't care about the reason. They only care about protecting their own rules." "Okay, stop arguing." Hanjin looked at Sissa. "If we go to Isolated Cliff City, can you guarantee our safety?" "Isolated Cliff City is the safest place," Sassu smiled. "It's just a little farther, at least 10 days away." "Then let's go to Isolated Cliff City." "Ew. Don't you care about my opinion at all?" Morrison said angrily. "Let's vote. I agree to go to Isolated Cliff City. What about you?" Hanjin raised his hand. "Agree," Sunir said. "Agree," Sassu said. "Agree." Chile, Stilberg, and Michel all raised their hands. Chapter 48. After 16 days of trekking, Hanjin and the others finally approached isolated Cliff City. During this period of time, he also learned some things about isolated Cliff City. Isolated Cliff City was very similar to the neighboring Bite Man. They both refused to participate in the war and had a sense of permanent neutrality. However, the Bite Man was forced to declare its neutrality after losing the trust of its neighbors due to its capriciousness. Isolated Cliff City, on the other hand, had always maintained its neutrality since its establishment. The internal system of Isolated Cliff City and the Bite Man was very different. In the Bite Man, the four lords of the Acropolis took turns to be the boss, and anyone could be the boss. However, in Isolated Cliff City, all the political affairs were decided by the 9 local business groups. They formed a council of elders with a total of 9 people. As long as 5 people agreed, the political affairs would be carried out. After all, it was a chaotic time now. Therefore, the 9 business groups had developed to become armed business groups. However, in Isolated Cliff City, there was still an existence that could compete with the 9 business groups, the Mercenary Association. The policies made by the business groups could only affect the civilians. The mercenaries, in addition to acting as private bodyguards and protecting the business groups, lived by hunting magical beasts and were not restricted by the business groups. If the business groups tried to interfere with the mercenaries' freedom, it would be a great taboo, and the mercenaries would not give in. On the other hand, the business groups also had their own armed forces, so the mercenaries did not dare to make too much trouble and could maintain a delicate balance. The business groups had also thought of using money to bribe the high-ranking mercenaries in order to divide the power of the Mercenary Association. However, it turned out that the gains did not make up for the losses. As long as a high-ranking mercenary was not too lazy, he could earn an amazing amount of money and be free. He could work when he wanted to and play when he did not want to work. If a high-ranking mercenary was to serve him all day long, he would have to pay several times more than his previous income. It was possible to raise a few, but no one could afford to raise too many. Moreover, the business groups had neglected the laziness of people. In the past, if they did not work, they would starve. Now, whether they worked or not, they could get money to spend. Who would be willing to work so hard? What's more, mercenaries were used to a free life. Being ordered around by others, it was inevitable that they would have a rebellious mentality. After all, mercenaries were not soldiers. They could cooperate with others, but they would not obey orders like puppets. Most importantly, the collapse of the Association of Mercenaries would do no good to Isolated Cliff City. The situation in Isolated Cliff City was complicated and had to be governed by strict laws. The Association of Mercenaries was the best enforcer. Only the Association of Mercenaries could maintain fairness and not favor any business group. Of course, this was all on the surface. Morrison's and the others had no idea what was going on inside. Isolated Cliff City was located in a forest. However, the dense forest near the city had been cut down and turned into wheat fields. Looking from afar, it looked very neat. Behind Isolated Cliff City, there was an extremely tall mountain that pierced straight into the clouds. That was the origin of the name Isolated Cliff. Hanjin and the others looked happy. Finally, they could live a normal life again. However, Morrison's seemed to be very reluctant. He walked slowly at the back. The closer they got to Isolated Cliff City, the slower his movements became. His face was full of sneakiness. If this continued, even a fool would be able to tell that something was wrong with him. Hanjin stopped and frowned. Morrison's, what's wrong with you? Nothing. Morrison's forced a smile. Morrison's, tell us the truth. Do you have any enemies in Isolated Cliff City? Hanjin said, if you do, I hope you can tell us now, so that we don't get caught off guard. Yeah, Morrison's, just tell us what's wrong. Don't you trust us? Sasu added. Not enemies. You misunderstood. Morrison scratched his head. Then who is it? Morrison stuttered for a long time. Seeing that everyone was staring at him, he knew that he had to say something. He forced himself to say, It's a woman. Hanjin's eyes lit up. He and Sasu looked at each other. What kind of woman is she? She? What should I say? She's a woman. Morrison's looked around. How old is she? Around 20. How old is she? 3 years older than me. What's wrong? Morrison's asked. Nothing. I'm just asking. Han Jin smiled. Is she pretty? She's just average. How long have you known her? About 10 years. You two have a good relationship? Are you leaving or not? Moxink finally became angry out of shame. If you don't leave, I'll leave by myself. After saying that, he strode forward. But after only 3 or 4 steps, he turned around and walked back. Sasu, can I borrow your wand? What for? Sasu didn't understand, but he still passed the wand to Morrison's. This is for you. Morrison's put his greatsword in Sasu's hand. Morrison's greatsword was at least 40 pounds. Sasu almost couldn't hold it. Fortunately, he was not too weak, so he was able to hold it in time. Miss Chi, can I borrow your cloak? Morrison's looked at Chi. But this is for women, Chi said in surprise. It's okay. Just help me, Morrison said with a smile. Chi had no choice but to take off her cloak and pass it to Morrison's. Morrison's didn't say anything and put the cloak on himself. However, his head was at least 3 times bigger than Chi-Li's. The cloak wrapped tightly around his head and face, making him look extremely comical. Morrison's turned around and walked forward. Everyone burst into laughter. Even Sunir was laughing. The cloak could cover up to Chi-Li's knees, but it couldn't even cover Morrison's butt. In fact, his butt was even more prominent. Furthermore, he was a tall, burly man with a toothpick-like wand in his hand. It was too ridiculous. Do I look ugly? Morrison's looked around. Unfortunately, he couldn't see his own back. Sasu, cast a mirror image spell for me. I'm just a high-grade warlock. How can I cast a mirror image spell? Sasu smiled bitterly. Morrison's, you'll attract more attention if you do this. Han Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Actually, if you shave off your beard, no one will be able to recognize you. Right? Morrison's yelled in surprise and joy. Sasu, come, do me a favor. He pulled off the cloak as he spoke, but the cloak was too tight. With a rip, the cloak was torn in half. I'm curious now. What kind of woman can scare Morrison's like this? Sunir said with a smile. I'm curious too. Han Jin looked at isolated Cliff City in the distance. It seems that Morrison's grew up here. Chapter 49. Normally, a man with a big beard would look rude and barbaric, but after shaving off his beard, he would look very young, at least in comparison. Morrison's was different. He had a square face, but without the beard, the hard lines on his face were exposed, and the muscles on his face became more obvious. With his sharp eyes, he looked murderous and ferocious. From now on, whether the children in isolated Cliff City would cry at night would depend on the performance of Morrison's. Han Jin suddenly felt that maybe he had come up with a bad idea, but it was impossible to let the beard grow back immediately since it had been shaved off. Let's go to the city first. The wheat fields outside the isolated Cliff City had been harvested. Since it was almost dusk, there were not many pedestrians going in and out of the city, and there were no soldiers guarding the gate. Therefore, the 3 of them easily walked into the city. Looking at the scenery on both sides of the street, Han Jin suddenly remembered what Sasu had said. Hundreds of years ago, the whole continent was a unified empire, but then there was a sudden civil strife, and finally it evolved into a situation where the feudal lords ruled separately. Radon Town, the 11th town of the Bite Man, and the isolated Cliff City in front of them all had similar architectural styles. The evolution of the continent should be similar to what Sasu had said. Radon Town couldn't be compared with the 11th town of the Bite Man. The former was a small village, while the latter was an important town of the Acropolis. But the 11th town couldn't be compared with the isolated Cliff City either. The street under their feet was twice as wide as the one in the 11th town. If it was an ordinary horse carriage, this street could accommodate 8 or 9 horse carriages running side by side, and it stretched so far that they couldn't see the end of it. This kind of style was impressive, but it was a pity that he hadn't been to other cities, so it was hard for him to make a comparison. Morrison's was very familiar with this city. When Han Jin said that he wanted to find a small and quiet hotel, he led them through streets and alleys and came to a very remote corner, where they found a shabby hotel. The decoration inside was even worse than that of Michelle's shop. The owner was an old man in his 60s who always squinted his eyes and yawned constantly, as if he couldn't get enough sleep. Of course, the price was also very cheap. If a few people booked the entire inn, they would only need to spend 30 silver coins a day, including the cost of food. Han Jin thought it was cheap, but the owner was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He hurried to prepare food for the guests and boiled more hot water. They all felt tired and sat on the chair lazily. At this moment, the door of the hotel was pushed open, and two big men came in one after another, shouting, "Boss, book 2 rooms for us." "Sorry, this hotel has been booked by us," Han Jin said with a smile. "What do you mean? You don't want us to stay?" One of the big men stared at Han Jin. "There are no more empty rooms here. I remember that there is another hotel not far north. You two can go there. Don't King nag, move over there." The big man slammed the counter, and a strong smell of alcohol came out of his mouth. "Where's the boss? Where's the boss?" Morrison's was already in a bad mood. He slammed the table and stood up. "Are you King deaf? We have booked this hotel. Do you hear me? Get out." The man was furious. He rolled up his sleeves and rushed towards Moxink, but his companion stopped him and whispered something to him. The man raised his head and glanced at Moxink. Then, without saying a word, he walked out gloomily. In this day and age, being ugly is an advantage. Han Jin sighed. He greeted people with a smile, but Morrison scolded him as soon as he opened his mouth. The difference in treatment between the two was too big. "Me? Are you saying I'm ugly?" Morrison's pointed at his own nose and yelled. "Ask them." Han Jin kicked the ball to the side. "Not ugly, but not good-looking either," Sasu said tactfully. "Stillberg, are you saying I'm ugly?" Morrison's pointed out. "No, you're not ugly." Stillberg was shocked. He blinked his eyes and finally squeezed out a sentence. "You're pretty cool." Morrison's rolled his eyes at Han Jin. He didn't expect to convince everyone. He would be satisfied as long as one person supported him. "Didn't you say that isolated Cliff City is very safe?" Han Jin suddenly frowned. "I think something is wrong. What happened to those 2 people just now? There are mercenaries everywhere. It's normal to fight here." Morrison's said in a muffled voice. "I grew up fighting. It's fine as long as no one dies. Can you promise that something like George won't happen again?" Han Jin asked slowly. They had improved greatly after 4 months of hard work. They already had 4 8th-grade magic crystals. If they were cheated now, it would be a huge loss. "No, we can complain to the Chamber of Commerce. Even if the Chamber of Commerce doesn't care, we can still go to the Mercenary Association. There's always a place for us to reason with." Morrison shook his head. "I've lived here for a long time, and I've never heard of such a thing." "I hope so." Han Jin was still a bit hesitant, but there was no point in thinking about it now. He then changed the topic. "Sasso, how much can an 8th-grade magic crystal be sold for?" The value of a magic crystal is not only related to its grade and quality, but also to its element. Sasu said slowly. "If it's an 8th-grade fire element magic crystal, it can be sold for at least 10,000 gold coins. If you want to sell it, someone will buy it immediately." "How much? 10,000 gold coins?" Han Jin was shocked. When he got an 8th-grade magic crystal, he only knew that everyone was very happy, but he didn't expect it to be so valuable. "Yes, that's the lowest price," Sasu said with a smile. Lightning element magic crystals are more expensive, followed by water element magic crystals and air element magic crystals. Earth element magic crystals are the least valuable. "How much can it be sold for?" "If you can find someone who needs it, it can be sold for 1 or 2,000 gold coins. Maybe even a little more." "Isn't the difference too big?" "Not much. Think about it. What's the greatest use of a magic crystal? It can increase the power of magic." Cessation said in a low voice, "Now there are wars everywhere. The most lethal magic on the battlefield is fire magic and lightning magic. Therefore, the supply of fire magic crystals and lightning magic crystals is always in short supply. Although the power of an earth element forbidden spell is very powerful, how many people can release a forbidden spell?" Hanjin was silent for a moment, and then suddenly laughed. There's such a thing. There doesn't seem to be anything strange about it, right? Sasu asked, puzzled. If I use a fire element magic crystal to exchange for 7 or 8 earth element magic crystals of the same grade, will anyone do it? Hanjin said slowly. Of course, there will be people who will do it. A smile appeared on Hanjin's face again. He found that this world was like heaven to him. He only needed energy. There wasn't much difference between a fire element magic crystal and an earth element magic crystal. With these convenient conditions, if he still couldn't cultivate an indestructible golden body, then he might as well kill himself. Chapter 50. It didn't take long for the owner to prepare a simple dinner. Since he could only earn a few dozen silver coins a day, of course, he wouldn't treat the guests with a lavish meal. There was only some bread, cheese, and fried eggs. However, everyone had barbecued meat every day in the forest, which was unbearable. Now that they could finally eat a normal meal, everyone ate to their heart's content and quickly finished all the food. After dinner, Morrison's, who was in a bad mood, went back to rest early. Hanjin, on the other hand, couldn't stay idle. He heard that isolated Cliff City was a city that never slept, so he wanted to go out and take a look. He told Sasu about this idea, and Sasu and Hanjin had the same idea. Together with Sunir and Chili, the four of them walked out of the inn together. There were 9 business groups in isolated Cliff City, as well as a powerful mercenary association. There were guards and mercenaries everywhere. In a city like this, there were 2 industries that were very developed: wine, sex, and gambling. The mercenaries risked their lives and made a fortune. When they returned to the human city, they needed to relax and vent. No one could live in tension all the time. That was why there were so many bars in isolated Cliff City. Some of the streets were almost connected to each other. There were no brothels or casinos in isolated Cliff City, but the bars could provide all 3 services. The waitresses floated around the tables like butterflies. After negotiating with the guests, they could go up to the 2nd floor to fulfill the contract. Most of the bars had casinos for the guests to have fun. For many mercenaries, the bar was their second home. After drinking a few glasses of wine, they would drag the maids upstairs to fool around for a while. After that, they would come down and drink again. After that, they would go and try their luck. What a happy life. Of course, you had to be able to earn money. Hanjin and Sasu walked in front, whispering sneakily. After listening to Sasu's introduction, Hanjin really wanted to go to the bar to have a look. However, there were 2 people following behind them, and the money was in Sunir's hands. It wasn't easy to ask for money, so he could only give up. Sasu, where is the mercenary association? Hanjin asked. I don't know. Sasu shook his head. Haven't you been to isolated Cliff City before? No. Who said I was here? Then what you said just now. The bars in isolated Cliff City are very famous. I heard about it from others, Sasu said with a smile. I thought you were a regular here. Hanjin was a little disappointed. Don't joke around. How can I have so much money to waste? Sasu blinked. Regular customer? You want me to bring? Forget it. Pretend I didn't say anything. Hanjin turned around and called out, Sunir, do you know where the Mercenary Association is? I don't know. At this moment, a clear voice said, Sir, do you need a tour guide? Hanjin turned around and saw a 12 or 13-year-old boy standing there. His face was full of childishness and his body was thin. His clothes were a little shabby, but they were very clean. There was also a long sword hanging from his waist. Compared to his body, the sword didn't seem to match and was almost dragged to the ground. Tour guide? Yes, sir. My fee is very cheap. Only 3 silver coins a day. Little guy, you're quite good at doing business. It's already so late, and you want 3 silver coins just to take us around? Sasu said with a smile. Although they were now rich, their mindset hadn't changed. Especially Sasu, who had been traveling all over the world all year round and encountered too many situations where money was a problem. Therefore, he was very careful about money. Sir, when I said one day, I meant the whole day. At this time tomorrow, as long as you want, I will accompany you all the time. the boy said in a neither servile nor overbearing tone. What's your name? Han Jin asked. You can call me Little Joseph. Okay, we'll hire you. First, take us to the Mercenary Association. Han Jin nodded and said, Sir, do you need a carriage? No, we'll walk. Little Joseph's eyes flashed with disappointment, but he concealed it very well. He immediately smiled and said, Sir, please follow me. Han Jin and Sasu weren't simple people. They both noticed the change in the boy. Sasu laughed in a low voice and said, This kid is still testing us. Is he afraid that we can't afford the commission? Maybe he wants to see if he can get more tips. Han Jin laughed. The Mercenary Association was not too far away from their current location. After walking for more than 20 minutes, a tall brick building jumped into their view. There was also a large square in front of them. Hundreds of large torches were lit around the square, illuminating the square as if it was daytime. There were many professions gathered in the square. From their equipment, it was easy to determine their professions. There were warriors, knights, magicians, and archers. None of them looked weak. Sir, if you want to accept a mercenary mission, you'd better learn more about the Terasha Mountains. You can ask me. My consultation fee is very cheap, 50 silver coins. Little Joseph showed his white teeth. Consultation fee? Han Jin laughed. Sir, this isn't funny. Little Joseph said solemnly. The Mercenary Association has a total of 14 teleportation portals, which can send mercenaries to the depths of the Terasha Mountains. Do you know the specific magic coordinates of each portal? Do you know what to pay attention to after being teleported? Do you know what high-level major monsters to be careful of? In order to protect the mercenaries, the Mercenary Association has built permanent shelters in the Terasha Mountains. If you encounter a major monster that you can't defeat, do you know where to run? Little Joseph's words left Han Jin and Sasu speechless. I think your life is worth more than 50 silver coins, right? You know all this? Han Jin asked. Of course, Little Joseph replied proudly. Sunir walked up from behind with a smile. She flicked her finger, and a gold coin flew out of her hand toward Little Joseph. Little Joseph's movements were very agile. He caught the coin, looked at it carefully, and put it away. I've paid you the consultation fee. Give us an introduction, Sunir said softly. You're giving it all to me? Little Joseph asked slyly. As long as your introduction can satisfy us. Sasu curled his lips. This elf is too much of a spendthrift. You're from the same mercenary group? Little Joseph's gaze swept over Han Jin and the others. Yes. Han Jin smiled. I suggest that you don't take the risk. You lack powerful warriors. What kind of introduction was this? Han Jin was about to speak when suddenly a violent magic fluctuation came from behind the square. Then the professionals in the square began to riot. Chapter 51. It's really the Red Vanguards. Look, those lunatics are back. Keep your voice down. Han Jin heard the whispers from the crowd. He couldn't help but look in that direction. The professionals in the square parted like a tide, and a few figures swaggered out. Walking in front were two warriors. They were about the same height and were very burly. One was wearing heavy armor, and the other was wearing light armor. Their eyes were equally cold as they scanned the crowd without any emotion. Han Jin had a feeling that this coldness was not deliberately made. It was naturally formed after experiencing countless bloody baptisms and countless tests of life and death. Walking behind them was a male mage. Compared to his companions in front, he was dressed very luxuriously, especially his magic staff, which was inlaid with a fist-sized fiery red magic crystal. Even the light from the hundreds of large torches around them could not block out the light from the magic crystal. Behind them was a female elf with a dark green longbow on her back. She had long blue hair and light steps. Finally, there was a man in a black cloak. He was very thin, and his eyes were very cold. When his gaze swept over, Han Jin suddenly felt a chill in his throat. Sasu on the side swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty. Obviously, he had a similar feeling. The elf saw Sunir, and her eyes lit up. Then she walked over as if nothing had happened and shouted, You guys, don't go out fooling around today. Go to the Lily Hotel and rest early. It's still so early. How can we sleep? The mage turned back and said, Strange. Why are you suddenly controlling us today? Don't forget, we still have to accept that mission tomorrow. The elf frowned. Don't worry. When have we ever delayed anything? The warrior walking in front laughed. The group of people walked through the square and disappeared into the distance. The professionals in the square were still whispering about something. Hanjin knew that every profession had an existence that people looked up to. From the attitude of the crowd, it was not difficult to see that the mercenary team was definitely a legendary team. If one day we can do the same, Sasu sighed. Don't look down on the youth because they are poor. Hanjin smiled. Give us a few more years, and we may not necessarily be worse than them. If someone else had said this, Sasu would definitely have scoffed. However, Hanjin was different. His magic had brought everyone a future with unlimited temptation. Taking himself as an example, he had thought that becoming a high-grade warlock within 2 years was already very good. But with the help of Hanjin, he had already broken through the bottleneck a month ago. In his opinion, as long as Hanjin was there, the future was not far away. Sir, they are the Red Vanguards. Little Joseph said softly. His expression was very strange. In front of him were his employers. He couldn't laugh at anyone. However, what these people said was really ridiculous. I know they're the Red Vanguard. Hanjin acted as if he didn't hear anything. He said indifferently, We have already paid you the consultation fee. Is there anything you want to introduce to us? Little Joseph was very dedicated. He answered all the questions and explained patiently. The Mercenary Association had 14 one-way magic teleportation circles. They could directly send mercenaries to the depths of the Terrashaw Mountains. All the mercenaries could be roughly divided into 3 types. The first-rate mercenaries were all high-grade professionals. They always took on difficult missions and specialized in hunting high-grade magical beasts. They went directly through the teleportation circles and used teleportation scrolls after completing the mission. Although this trip cost a lot of gold coins, it saved a lot of time. If they were strong enough, the time saved could be used to do a few more missions. The second-rate mercenaries were mixed. They could only take on middle-grade missions. They might go through the teleportation circles, but they definitely didn't have the financial resources to buy teleportation scrolls. Otherwise, the rewards they exchanged for with their lives would have to be handed over to the Mercenary Association. They might even be in debt. As for the third-rate mercenaries, they could only rely on their own hands and legs. Hanjin somewhat understood why Isolated Cliff City was so prosperous. There were 2 ways to make money. One was to monopolize, and the other was to make money from wars. Now that there were wars everywhere, the business of magic crystals was certainly not bad. Moreover, the management of the Mercenary Association was very professional. They tried to improve the efficiency of the mercenaries and also tried their best to ensure their safety. This had greatly increased the production of magic crystals. Part of the reason why the 9 major business groups of Isolated Cliff City didn't poach mercenaries from the Mercenary Association was because they realized that mercenaries were the foundation of the city's development. If they poached the high-grade mercenaries, there would be fewer people working, and their income would naturally decrease. As for sending guards out to hunt for magic crystals, that was pure nonsense. No matter how much the mercenary group earned, it would always be divided equally. The guards would definitely have to give more than half of their harvest to the business groups. Who would be willing to do that? It would be great if they had the courage to join a mercenary group. The Red Vanguards was a very powerful mercenary group. It was said that the lowest grade of the 5 members was a 9th-level professional. In Isolated Cliff City, there were more than 20 first-class mercenary groups. They all lived very luxurious lives, staying in the most comfortable hotels, drinking the best wine, and playing with the most beautiful women. Hearing this, Hanjin couldn't help but laugh when he saw little Joseph's shining eyes. Little guy, do you know what playing with women is? Little Joseph's face suddenly turned red. He said stubbornly, Don't think that I know everything just because I'm young. Tell me, how do you play with women? Sasa laughed. He was also full of dirty tricks. I, little Joseph clenched his teeth and was about to say something when Sunir said lightly, "You guys, do you think we don't exist? Don't teach the kid bad things." Hanjin turned around and found that Chi Li's face was also very red. Seeing Hanjin looking at her, she rolled her eyes at Hanjin. Hanjin laughed. "Let's go inside and take a look." "Okay." Sasu nodded. Hanjin deliberately stayed a few steps behind and whispered to Sunir, "That elf, do you know her?" "Yes, her name is Julia. She's a good friend of my brother." Sunir didn't hide it. "I guess she also recognized you." Hanjin paused. "She asked you to go to the Lily Hotel to find her." "I know." Sunir nodded. "You three go back by yourselves. I'll ask little Joseph to take me to the Lily Hotel." "Is there something wrong?" "No. She hasn't been back for more than 10 years. She probably wants to ask me about the situation in Wild Willow City." "Then why didn't she talk to Sunir just now?" Chili asked with a strange expression. "Chili, there are a lot of things that you need to think about yourself. You can't always ask others, or you'll never grow up. There's nothing in the world that doesn't happen for a reason. She must have her reasons for not talking to Sunir." Hanjin said softly. "For example, she might have an enemy here or offended someone. The other party wouldn't dare to mess with the Red Vanguards. If they know that Sunir is her friend, then maybe they'll find trouble with us." "I understand." Chili nodded heavily. Chapter 52. It was already dawn. Hanjin yawned as he walked down the stairs. After returning from the Mercenary Association yesterday, he had absorbed a few more elemental energy and created 3 more thunder charms. Then, he had to think about some things, so he slept very late. They had already booked the entire hotel, so they could use the furniture for free. They sat very far apart. Morrison's took a table, Stillberg and Michel sat diagonally across from Morrison's. Chili hid in a corner, and Sasu sat near the counter. Sunir was the only one missing. "Where's Sunir? She didn't come back the whole night?" Hanjin was a little surprised. "She's right behind you." Sasu laughed. Hanjin turned around and saw Sunir walking down the stairs. He just noticed that Sunir didn't make any sound when she walked. "What's the matter?" "Nothing." Hanjin shrugged his shoulders. Although it was said that it was better to lean against a big tree, it was still inappropriate to get in touch with the Red Vanguards. Someone who could make the Red Vanguards hesitate was undoubtedly a terrifying existence for them. At this stage, they couldn't afford to get into trouble. Besides, mercenaries were very cold-blooded. Of course, mercenaries could form friendships with other mercenaries, but fundamentally speaking, it was a combination of interests. Under the circumstances where they had the same goal, they divided the work and worked together to reap the greatest benefits. They did not have the leisure to support and help rookies. Hanjin did not think that interacting with the Red Vanguard would bring him any benefits. He might even be poached. If Sunir was poached, it would be a serious blow to them. At this moment, the door of the hotel was kicked open, and a fiery red figure rushed in. It was a young swordswoman. She was tall and slender, even taller than Hanjin. Her hair was red, which was not strange. However, the soft armor she was wearing was also red. She looked like a burning flame. She had a huge 2-handed sword on her back. It was as big as Morrison's greatsword. Under normal circumstances, most rational women would refuse to use such a weapon. It was too shocking. However, the woman's appearance was very beautiful. Her eyes were big, her nose was high, her lips were small, and her skin was white. She had a seductive aura, and her figure was very hot. The places that should be protruding were high, and the places that should be tucked in were tight. The most eye-catching thing was that she wasn't wearing tights. Between her skirt and boots, a section of her white thigh was exposed. "Morrison's!" the woman yelled. Morrison's was very calm. He first looked to his left, then to his right. Finally, he pointed at his nose and said politely, "Miss, are you talking to me?" The woman snorted and strode towards Moxink. She stepped on the chair with one foot and looked down at Moxink condescendingly. "Miss, my name is Zwa." "I think you got the wrong person. Pretend. Keep acting in front of me." The woman reached out and grabbed Morrison's ear. Perhaps she was too fast, or perhaps Morrison's aura was completely suppressed by her, so his reaction was half a beat slower. He was caught red-handed, which was not befitting of his status. The woman sneered, "Don't forget, I grew up with you. Do you think I won't recognize you just because you shaved yourself into a duck egg? No, my name is Zwa. These are my friends. If you don't believe me, you can, kid, I'll be honest with you. You didn't even have a beard when you were 16 or 17. Do you think you've changed a lot now?" The woman used some strength and lifted Morrison's up. "Are you trying to trick me? Bastard." Morrison's was furious. He grabbed the woman's hand and twisted it hard. The woman could not help but let go of Morrison's ear due to the pain. "Do you dare to hit me?" The woman looked at Morrison's in disbelief. "Do you know who they are? They're my friends." Morrison's lost his temper and yelled, "How dare you treat me like this in front of my friends? Do you think I'm still a kid?" The woman's expression changed. She suddenly said softly, "Okay, it's my fault." Morrison's was venting his dissatisfaction, both the present and the past. He did not react in time. He was stunned. "What did you say?" "It's my fault. Don't be angry." The woman reached out and grabbed Morrison's arm. Jean and the others were as silent as cicadas in cold weather. Judging from the woman's posture at the beginning, they had thought that they would pull out their giant swords and fight fiercely. Who would have thought that they would give in the blink of an eye? Morrison's pulled a long face and swung his arm hard, flinging the woman's hand aside. "I admit that I'm hot-tempered, but why don't you think about my suffering?" The woman lowered her head and said in a trembling voice, "You left just like that and left everything to me. Do you know how I've been? Every day, people rolled their eyes at me and bullied me every day. By the end of her speech, the woman was already sobbing and rubbing her eyes. "That's enough," Morrison said in a low, muffled voice. "I haven't seen you cry for more than 10 years. Why are you rubbing your eyes?" The woman looked up. "You're not angry anymore?" Jean and the others looked at each other. They did not dare to say a word. "Come, let me introduce you to a few friends." Morrison sighed. "This is Sylvia, my sister. This is Raphael. Young man, you're quite pretty. Do you have a wife?" The woman smiled. "Don't worry. Tomorrow I'll—" Before the woman could finish her words, Moxing grabbed her and pulled her back. Then Moxing shouted, "She's my friend. Don't mess around, okay? I know he's your friend. That's why I shut up." The woman obediently shut her mouth. However, after a few seconds, she could not hold it in anymore. She poked Morrison's in the waist and said shyly, "I like the way you are now." Morrison's was silent. He looked around as if he was looking for something. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Raphael. I'm a prophet." Jean stood up with a smile. He then introduced Sunir, Sasu, and the others. The woman named Sylvia became normal again. After some small talk, they found out that Sylvia had not eaten in the morning. They put 2 tables together and sat around it. The owner of the restaurant brought out the prepared breakfast. Chapter 53. As they were eating, Morrison suddenly thought of something. "Sylvia, who did you say bullied you? Was it Bailey and his gang?" "Huh, I was just joking with you." Silner raised her eyebrows and yelled excitedly, "Who dares to bully me?" Before she could finish, Sylvia saw Morrison's expression change. She quickly quieted down. "I knew it. I shouldn't have asked." Moxink heaved a sigh as he clasped his forehead with both hands. His fingers were so hard, as if he was going to crush his own head. For him, today was really a disgrace. Jean and the others couldn't say anything. They could only look at Morrison's with sympathy. Just then, the door opened and little Joseph walked in. "Good morning, my lord," little Joseph said with a smile. "Little Joseph, didn't you say you were going to stay with us?" "Miss Sunir asked me to go back and rest," little Joseph explained. "Oh, I thought you snuck out to play with women," Jean said with a smile. You really know how to joke." Little Joseph blushed again. Sylvia's eyes suddenly lit up when she heard the words "play with women." She turned around and waved at little Joseph. "Little guy, come here. Eat your food." Morrison said word by word, like a constipated person who was suffering from extreme pain. So annoying, Sylvia pouted and muttered under her breath. She then picked up her fork and stabbed at the bread. With a crashing sound, the plate containing the bread could not withstand the force of the fork and broke into pieces. Sassu and the others continued to eat as if nothing had happened. Sylvia felt bad and quickly explained, "I didn't do it on purpose." Seeing that no one paid any attention to her, she repeated, "I really didn't do it on purpose." Ahem. Hanjin coughed and changed the topic. "Little Joseph, have you heard of Morgan Merchant Group?" Morgan Merchant Group? Little Joseph lowered his head and thought for a while. "I think I've heard of it before. It should be in the south. How about this? Sooner, go to the market and sell a few magic crystals. Then buy some grade 3 and 4 earth magic crystals. If you can't find any, go to the Mercenary Association and post a mission." Hanjin thought for a while. "Try your best to buy as many as you can. Those grade 3 and 4 earth magic crystals aren't worth much." "Okay," Sunia replied. If it had been a few months ago, Cessation, Moxink, and the others would have asked him why he bought so many useless magic crystals. But now, Hanjin had become the most important person in the team, and they all had eyes. They could more or less see that Hanjin was consuming magic crystals every day. For example, the hundreds of black raven magic crystals had completely disappeared, so no one dared to ask. "Sassu, Chile, and I will go to Morgan Merchant Group to have a look." Hanjin said in a low voice. No matter what changes have taken place in the Morgan Chamber of Commerce, the situation should be clear in the past few months. "Understood." Sassu and Chile nodded together. "Chile, even if things are going in the worst direction, don't be impulsive. Impulsiveness won't solve the problem. Don't worry, we are here." "Okay," Chile replied softly. "Michelle, Stillberg, you two stay in the hotel. Don't go out." Hanjin's eyes fell on Morrison's. "Morrison's, do you have anything to do today? If not, come with us to Morgan Merchant Group. What do you think?" Morrison's face was full of bitterness and hatred. "Ha! Then I won't disturb you." Sylvia looked at Hanjin from head to toe. It had nothing to do with brains. If an ordinary person heard this conversation, it wouldn't be difficult to guess that Hanjin was the one giving orders. She felt very strange. Strength determined everything, but it seemed that Hanjin wasn't qualified to be the center of attention. "Is there anything else?" Hanjin asked. Everyone shook their heads. Hanjin thought for a while and said, "Sunir, what did your friends talk to you about?" "If it's convenient, just some things about Wild Willow City. She also told me that if I run into any trouble, I can go to her," Sunir said softly. "Will her companions help us?" "She's the captain. They should be." Sunir cautiously covered up the name Red Vanguard. "Will an elf be the captain?" Sassu was surprised. "What's wrong with elves?" Sunir said unhappily. "She came to isolated Cliff City more than 10 years ago, and that mercenary team was created by her. Why can't she be the captain?" "Sunir, I'm not targeting anything," Sassu explained with a wry smile. "Elves are too kind. When faced with a critical moment, they always hesitate. As far as I know, you're looking at us with the eyes of 200 years ago." Sunir calmly interrupted Sassu. Okay, it's not a big deal. Why are you talking about race?" Hanjin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Sunir, give me some money. I only have a dozen silver coins left." A cloth bag appeared in Sunir's hand, and she put on the table with a thud. Hanjin picked it up and put it into his space ring. Wow. Sylvia was seriously shocked. She stood up and bared her fangs. "It's a space ring. Quick, let me see it." Morrison's face turned green. He stood up and dragged Sylvia upstairs. Sylvia struggled with all her might. She was very curious. It wasn't easy to see a space ring. If she didn't look at it carefully, she would feel like dying. Seeing the two of them quarreling all the way to the second floor, everyone was speechless. After a long while, Cessation spat out 2 syllables. "Oh my God! I finally understand why Morrison's didn't want to come back." Sunir understood Sassua's thoughts very well. How did that woman called Sylvia find this place? Hanjin laughed. "We'll ask her later." "I don't think she'll be able to keep secrets. Let's go take care of business first." We'll meet back at noon. Han Jin stood up. By the way, Sasu, you're now a high-grade warlock. Shouldn't you go to the Mercenary Association and apply for an advancement? No need. Have you ever seen a high-grade mercenary carrying a badge around all day? Sasu laughed. If you want to scare people, Morrison's is enough. Chapter 54. After dinner, Morrison's didn't show up. No one knew what he was doing with the big sister. Han Jin said goodbye to Sunir and went straight to South Street with little Joseph with Sasu, Chi Li, and others. Sir, it's here. Little Joseph pointed to a yard and shouted. Because of the space ring, little Joseph's attitude had become very cautious. For example, when they were in the carriage just now, he had refused several times when Han Jin asked him to sit on the carriage and would rather trot all the way below. The space ring could not only provide a different space, but also a symbol of identity. Han Jin looked around for a moment. This place was a little remote, but the yard covered a large area. The wall of the yard was about 2 meters high. Looking over the wall, he could see a row of brick houses inside. Similar to the situation in Radon Town, most of the houses of ordinary people were made of wood. Because it was close to the forest, wood was not valuable at all. People with a little status would choose to build their houses with bricks. But the rich would even find alchemists to make magic bricks. Their houses were not only fireproof and moth-proof, but also could withstand a certain degree of attack, just like a fortress. Han Jin winked at little Joseph, who knocked on the door of the yard. Is anyone there? Is anyone there? After knocking for a long time, there was no response. Han Jin went to the yard and tried to push the door, but the door was locked from the inside. Sir, they should have gone out. Let's come back in the afternoon. Little Joseph said. Han Jin's face became dignified. He looked up at the Chamber of Commerce's signboard hanging above. Then he went to the side and put his hand on the wall of the yard. His body rose from the ground and turned over the wall. My lord. Little Joseph was taken aback. He turned around and looked around nervously. With a swoosh, the courtyard door was pulled open from the inside. The 2 broken chains were still swaying and knocking against the courtyard door. Come in, Han Jin said slowly. Sir, we can't go in. If the Chamber of Commerce's people come back, they will treat us as thieves. Little Joseph cried. They won't be coming back. With that, Han Jin sheathed his sword and strode inside. Sasu stared blankly at Han Jin's back. Among them, he was the only one who noticed the hidden meaning behind Han Jin's words. There were more than 10 rooms in the courtyard, but all of them were empty. Sasu, Chi Li, and the others split up to search. After searching for a long time, they found nothing. Finally, they gathered in the main hall. There was a pile of ashes in front of Han Jin. When Sasu and Chi Li walked in, Han Jin was looking for something. Did you find anything? Sasu asked. The Morgan Chamber of Commerce should have evacuated from isolated Cliff City, Han Jin said slowly. Look, these must be the account books. What should we do? What can we do with just a few of us? Han Jin smiled. Little Joseph, take Miss Chi Li back first. Chi Li's face was full of disappointment. She followed little Joseph blankly. When she reached the door, she suddenly noticed that Han Jin and Sasu were still standing there. She suddenly turned around and asked, Did you find something? Sasu looked at Han Jin quietly. He didn't know how to answer. Chi Li said word by word, If you really found something, please tell me. I have the right to know. Han Jin hesitated for a moment, then waved his hand. Little Joseph, you go out first and wait for us outside. Be careful, don't let anyone in. Yes, sir. Little Joseph walked out in confusion. I smell the smell of death. Han Jin looked at Chi Li. This sentence was like a thunderbolt. Chi Li's face instantly turned pale. What do you mean? Han Jin looked to the west. When he was a private investigator, he often dealt with supernatural incidents. Even without using Tao, he could still feel the smell of death. The coldness, hatred, unwillingness, despair, and other things made up of resentment. He had already felt it when he was outside the courtyard. Not to mention, those people were very careless and left too many traces. Also, the ants crawling in and out and the flies trying to squeeze into the cracks, all revealed enough information. There was a massacre here. Han Jin glanced around. Are you sure you want to see them? Yes. Chili bit her lips and said. Han Jin didn't say anything. He walked to a slightly dented brick and stomped on it. Nothing happened. Han Jin paused for a moment, then realized that the mechanism inside must have been destroyed. Sasu, it shouldn't be a problem to cast a spell here, right? Let's see what kind of spell it is. Sasu also noticed the ants crawling in and out. He walked over and stomped on the brick, then shook his head and said, I can't open this. At this moment, there was a bang. Something was knocking on the brick below. Sasu was startled and hurriedly stepped back. That's bang, bang. The knocking became more and more rapid. Sasu stood in front of Qi Li and chanted a few spells, releasing a magic shield. Magic shield was a tier 6 spell. Sasu hadn't been a high-grade warlock for long, so this was the first time he cast a magic shield in a real battle. So, he wasn't very confident. He also cast a shield of earth on himself and Qi Li. Only then did he feel relieved. Han Jin's finger moved in the air, and a flickering talisman gradually took shape, quietly floating in the air. With a bang, the stone floor was knocked open by something, and several monsters covered in blood crawled out. Han Jin waved his hand and shouted, Go! The floating talisman suddenly turned into a white light, illuminating the entire hall. Then, it fell into the hole. The monsters let out ear-piercing screams, then turned into ashes. Zombies! How can there be zombies here? Sasu yelled. The ground rumbled, and rays of white light shot out from the hole. After a moment, everything became silent. Han Jin stood at the entrance of the cave and looked down. The pure light charm could play a powerful role in attacking such creatures. Even the ghosts he summoned couldn't resist it, let alone zombies. However, the pure light charm could only eliminate the monsters, but it couldn't eliminate the smell. A thick, nauseating stench rushed out from the cave. Qi Li gritted her teeth and walked forward step by step. Just as she was about to reach the hole, Han Jin stretched out his arm and stopped her. He sighed and said, Don't look. Han Jin originally didn't want to interfere with Qi Li. Many times, only disasters and grief could make people mature. However, the scene below was too tragic. There were dismembered corpses everywhere. He was worried that Qi Li couldn't bear it. Chapter 55. Qi Li bumped into Han Jin's arm and was hit by the stench. Her legs went soft, and she almost fell down. Fortunately, Han Jin held her in time. Qi Li looked up at Han Jin and asked in a trembling voice, Are they all dead? Han Jin nodded. Sasu frowned. Did someone attack Morgan and Company? I don't know. Maybe someone did it, or maybe they killed each other, Han Jin said in a low voice. But at least we know that there's a wizard among them. Qi Li's face was pale. She had been holding it in for months. She didn't want to stay in the forest when everyone was living a leisurely life. Her goal was to go back to Morgan and Company. The problem was that she was just an ordinary warrior who couldn't be any more ordinary. Now that she had no money, where could a girl who had no strength and no money go? She was also a very beautiful girl. Sometimes, beauty meant danger. She understood that the more beautiful a girl was, the more dangerous she was. Last time in the 11th town, she revealed her identity, but the people from Morgan & Co. didn't come to see her. From then on, she knew that something was wrong with Morgan & Company. The best choice was to let Han Jin and the others protect her. They would try their best to pacify the chaos in Morgan & Company. But she didn't have the right to ask anyone. She didn't contribute much from the beginning to the end. Everyone took care of her, which was good enough. Since someone dared to attack Morgan & Company, Han Jin and the others couldn't resist the power of the enemy. She couldn't let her friends die with her. Now, Qi Li was even more desperate when she heard that there was a wizard among the enemies. At this moment, little Joseph rushed in with his sword. Apparently, he had heard the explosion. Sir, what's wrong? Not bad, little guy. I thought you were scared away. Han Jin laughed. Little Joseph blushed. How is that possible? You're my employers now. I have to take responsibility. After saying that, He moved closer. When he got close to the entrance of the cave, he also smelled the stench. He couldn't help but cover his nose. What is this smell? Don't ask anymore. It's none of your business. Han Jin's gaze fell on Qi Li. Let's go back, okay? Qi Li gently pushed Han Jin away and nodded. Back at the hotel, Han Jin and the others were in low spirits, especially Qi Li. She didn't greet anyone and went straight to her room. Han Jin didn't want to waste time. He casually sat at the table, took out the wood that he had already prepared, and began to carve wholeheartedly. When night fell, Sunir still hadn't returned. Sasu was a little worried, so he went with little Joseph to the Mercenary Association to look for Sunir. Han Jin didn't want to move. He ran to the roof alone, leaned against the chimney, and observed the night view of isolated Cliff City. The word cultivate had a profound meaning. Many cultivators like to live in seclusion in the mountains because they wanted to cultivate their nature. They wanted to sit and watch the clouds rise and fall and listen to the ebb and flow of the tide. Everything had to return to nature. As for the saying, a little hermit lives in the forest, a great hermit lives in the city, it was just a fig leaf for pedantic scholars. It had nothing to do with cultivation. Living in the city was to be discovered and discovered. It was to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat if one really wanted to live in seclusion. How could it be more peaceful and leisurely than the mountains? Since Han Jin stepped into the door of cultivation, he had rarely left the city. He had no choice but to do so. However, he had developed a habit. Every day, he would take some time to go to a high place and look up at the bright stars and the lights of the city. He wanted to calm himself down completely, or to experience the feeling of loneliness at the top. He wanted to forcibly separate himself from the hustle and bustle of the secular world, which was good for his cultivation. He didn't know when, but a person slowly sat down beside him. Han Jin even smelled a faint fragrance. Why did you come back so late? Han Jin asked in a low voice. I issued a lot of tasks. I waited a little longer. Sunir handed over a bag. Inside are all third-grade earth element magic crystals. As for the 4th and 5th grade ones, you can leave them with me for safekeeping. Han Jin shook the bag with his hand and opened it. He said in surprise, so many. There are about 300 of them. How much did you spend? Not much. Earth element magic crystals are very cheap. Together with the 4th and 5th grade magic crystals, it only cost a little more than 100 gold coins. Sunir, you should be very famous in Wild Willow City, right? Han Jin asked with a smile. Spending 100 gold coins and saying it wasn't much was not something an ordinary person could say. Don't ask. I don't want to talk about this. Sunir changed the topic. Were the people of Morgan and company killed? Yes. What's your opinion? Should we help Qi Li? What's your opinion? Han Jin didn't answer, but asked back. I just talked with Qi Li about her family. According to their rules, she can only have access to the internal affairs of the business group after passing the assessment. That is to say, she knows almost nothing now and can't help us. Sunir said in a low voice. Actually, it's not a matter of whether to help her or not, but whether we can gain something. Han Jin understood Sunir's meaning. If we try hard, we're doomed to fail. Then why should we take risks? Whether it's the people of Holy Crown City who want to deal with Morgan and company, or the internal strife of the business group, they are much stronger than us. They are also more well-informed than us. If we bump into them, what good can we get? Sunir was silent. They secretly exchanged opinions here and decided not to help Qi Li. It was very cruel for Qi Li, but Han Jin didn't think he was wrong. From the perspective of a small team, it was better to be cruel to one person than to a group of people. We need a thief, Sunir said in a low voice. If we can find a high-grade thief and a high-grade warrior, our team will be perfect. At least we can find a way to find out what happened to Morgan and company. I remember Morrison's also said this. Han Jin said slowly. How about we go to the Mercenary Association tomorrow to recruit a thief? Don't be ridiculous. Sunir shook her head with a smile. You don't know how rare it is to have a good team. If we recruit a narrow-minded guy who likes to stir up trouble, our team will be broken up. For example, the space ring on your hand. If it were two other people, they wouldn't agree to give it to you. No matter what, they have to get their own benefits. Han Jin's eyes fell on the ring, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. By the way, Sunir suddenly thought of something. We could buy information. How about this? I will issue a task tomorrow to collect information about Morgan's business group. If there is hope, we can help Chi Li. You didn't see her eyes swollen because of crying. She is so pitiful. If it's dangerous, then forget it. Well, Han Jin shrugged. It was already very dangerous for the other side to have at least one wizard. How dangerous could it be? However, since Sunir changed her mind, he couldn't say anything. He could only take one step at a time. Chapter 56. The next morning, after breakfast, Sunir and Moxink went out to buy magic crystals. Moxink also wanted to go with them, claiming that he was looking for a suitable task to earn some money. But judging from his anxious expression, they all knew that he was eager to avoid someone's entanglement. The words "accept a mission" piqued Han Jin's curiosity. Michel and Stillberg also wanted to go out and broaden their horizons. In the end, they all left the inn and went to the Mercenary Association. The square in front of the Mercenary Association was crowded with people. It was much more lively than the night before. Sunir led everyone through the square and walked to a counter. She took a pen and paper from the counter and wrote a receipt on it. "Is this okay?" Chi Li said softly. "Why not?" Sunir was surprised. "I accepted it like this yesterday." "Too much." Chi Li pointed at the receipt with her finger. On the top of the receipt was written, "Buying 200 grade 3 earth element magic crystals. Each unit price is 20 silver coins." "What do you mean?" "We don't know the reasonable price of earth element magic crystals, and we don't know the market's reserves. We will lose a lot of money if we buy them like this." "Then you write the receipt." Sunir gave up her seat. "Okay." Chi Li agreed without hesitation. She took the pen and paper and wrote down a long list of numbers. The receptionist behind the counter took over the receipt and couldn't help but roll his eyes. Chi Li was not as generous as Sunir. Her receipt was for 5 magic crystals. The unit price of the first row was 20 silver coins, the unit price of the second row was 19 silver coins, and so on. She only bought 50 magic crystals in total, and the unit price was even reduced to 10 silver coins. The clerk glanced at Chi Li impolitely. It was free to give out missions and buy items here, but the Mercenary Association would take a commission of 1% from both parties. Even if Chi Li completed all the orders, the Mercenary Association would not make much money. It was inevitable that people would look down on her. "Okay, let's go somewhere else," Chi Li said casually. "Only 50 magic crystals? That's not enough." "No. Our goal this time is to find a reasonable price." Chi Li thought for a while and said, "Sunir, did you buy 200 magic crystals yesterday?" "No, I bought 50 at the beginning, and it didn't take long for me to finish it. Then I bought another 50, and when I came back, it was finished again. So I bought 200. "Gosh." Chi Li stared at Sunir. "Are you done? If you are, let's go upstairs and have a look." Morrison's called out from behind. Sunir and the others turned around and were about to leave when the clerk called out, "Hey, you haven't paid the deposit yet." "How much?" Sunir asked calmly. 3 gold coins." Sunir threw down 3 gold coins, grabbed the receipt with the Mercenary Association's seal, and turned around to leave. Chi Li couldn't help but ask, "Sunir, since the deal was done so quickly, it means that the price you gave was too high. Why didn't you lower the price?" "I don't understand, and I didn't think too much about it." Sunir was a little embarrassed. Han Jin and Sasu looked at each other. When they hired little Joseph yesterday, Sunir just threw out a gold coin. With this kind of attitude, even if she knew how to do business, she wouldn't waste her energy. Han Jin was someone who had suffered a lot. When he first came to this world, he was so hungry that he went crazy. Sasu wasn't rich either. They had more or less suffered because they didn't have money. Therefore, they criticized Sunir in their hearts, but on the surface, they acted as if nothing had happened. The Mercenary Association building was divided into 4 floors. The second floor was the high-class trading area. Only those with a trade volume of more than 100 gold coins could go to the second floor. The third floor was the VIP room. As for the fourth floor, even the native Morrisons didn't know what it was. The Mercenary Association was the home of thousands of mercenaries. Of course, one could imagine the scale of the building. The hall on the second floor was hundreds of meters long. There were more than 31-meter thick stone pillars. On each pillar, there were few lamps. They weren't oil lamps, but magic lamps that cost magic crystals. In the hall, there were about 300 to 400 mercenaries. They were either hurrying back and forth, waiting for something leisurely, or chatting softly with each other. Those who dared to earn 100 gold coins were at least at the 5th grade. There were even a few mercenaries wearing the badges of warriors and sages. Judging from their auras and postures, it was obvious that they were the leaders of mercenary groups or groups. Outside the window, waves of magic waves rose and fell one after another. The Mercenary Association had 14 one-way teleportation circles, and this was the peak time for them to use them. It was better to go to the Teresham Mountains during the day, and it was relatively safer. "Let's go to the third floor and take a look," Sasu whispered. "We can't go there, and we can't accept the VIP missions." Morrisons shook his head. They couldn't accept missions randomly. In order to prevent people from deliberately messing with them, they had to pay a third of the commission. If the mission failed or wasn't completed within the stipulated time limit, the commission would be paid to the person who issued the mission. As for whether the mercenary group that failed suffered heavy casualties, no one would care. Han Jin observed quietly. In front of him was a large screen made of crystals, on which were recorded all kinds of tasks and information about the purchase of magic crystals, arranged according to the amount of gold coins. The lowest reward for a task was more than 100 gold coins, while the highest was more than 900 gold coins. Han Jin suddenly discovered that the missions here weren't that difficult. For example, the gale wolves and giant lizards that he had seen before were all listed on the mission board, and the rewards were quite high. He looked over and saw another mission, and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The hide of an ironhide bull, a whole hide, and the reward was 600 gold coins. "What's wrong?" Morrisons asked. "Nothing." Han Jin hurriedly shook his head. If he had thought a way to kill those bulls back then, he would have earned over 4,000 gold coins. However, he could only think about it in his heart. Sunir and the others were getting along well with those bulls. If he dared to say it out loud, he would definitely be attacked. "I realized that the missions here aren't that difficult." Sasu and Han Jin had the same thought. "Morrisons, why don't we accept a mission? We can't just sit around doing nothing every day, right? The missions aren't that difficult. Did you see that mission that requires 20 gale wolf teeth? The reward is 110 gold coins. I don't need your help. I could do it myself." Morrison smiled. "The problem is, who would send a gale wolf to me? Walking in the depths of the Teresham Mountains, all kinds of accidents can happen at any time. A top-tier monster that migrates or hunts for food is enough to wipe out an entire mercenary group. The difficult part isn't the mission itself. It's how to survive in the Teresham Mountains and find the monster you want to kill. Every year, countless mercenaries lose their lives. Today, it's them. If we dare to go in, it might be our turn tomorrow." "Gale wolf teeth?" Han Jin suddenly remembered something. "Why didn't you say so earlier? What a pity." "Yeah, how many gale wolves did we kill in total? If we knew, we would have pulled out all the teeth." Sasu shouted. "Well," Morrison smiled bitterly. "I rarely went up to the second floor. How would I know that there are people who want to buy those things?" "You never went up to the second floor? Are you a mercenary or not?" "What can I do? Go my death." Morrisons glared. "Why don't you join another mercenary group?" Sunir asked softly. "Why don't I just take a random mission?" Morrison sighed. "If I go to the Teresham Mountains, I still have a chance to come back alive. If I dare to join another mercenary group, I'll be dead for sure." Author's note. There are some who say that the plot is very dull up to now. There's nothing I can do about it in the beginning. The main character's strength is too low, and danger lurks everywhere. People will die. I don't want this alternate world to be filled with handicapped and retarded people, nor do I want the main character to take in that god or dragon as his follower. It's still more interesting to work hard by oneself. Furthermore, I want to write something lighter. If it's too heavy and dark, it will tire me out. However, the main storyline will be clear soon. Chapter 57. Is it because of that's Sylvia? Sasu asked tentatively. Don't mention her name, okay? I want some peace and quiet, Morrison said in a low, muffled voice. I understand. I understand. Sasu chuckled. That guy seems to have accepted a few missions at once, Han Jin said in a low voice. There's no limit to that. As long as you have the ability, you can accept all the missions. Are we really not going to try? Sasu was still unwilling to give up. Try with our lives? Morrison's shook his head. We're still short on manpower, you know? Hunters and rogues are very important to any mercenary group. A good hunter can provide us with a safe camp, and a good rogue can mark out a clear path for us. Without them, we'll either be torn to pieces by monsters that sneak in at night, or be surrounded by monsters for no reason. What about you? Aren't warriors important? Han Jin laughed. Me? Morrison's said helplessly. If you're a hunter or a rogue, you can work with them without any worries. But warriors can't, especially those who ask you to work with them at the last minute. You have to be very, very careful. Their goal is to sacrifice you. As soon as Morrison's finished speaking, a middle-aged man wearing a bright silver mage robe slowly walked over. He looked Morrison's up and down, then saluted with one hand and smiled. Hello, I'm the High Sage, Cabri. Morrison's saluted back. Hello, I'm the fighter, Morrison's. Well, I just accepted a mission to kill a spiked tiger, but my group lacks a powerful warrior. Are you interested? Cabri's gaze swept across the group. You can send 2 people, and I'll split the profits 4 ways. My offer is already very generous. It was obvious that he had taken a liking to Sunir and ignored everyone else. Han Jin and the others looked at each other. Morrison's had just finished speaking, and now someone was trying to recruit them. This was too dramatic. I'm sorry, we just came back from the Terrashaw Mountains. We won't be going there for a while. Morrison's rejected politely. That's a pity. Cabri showed a disappointed expression, nodded, and walked away. Han Jin chuckled. It seems that warriors are also very important. Bullsh ***. Morrison snorted. Let's go. Since we're not going to accept any missions, what's the point of staying here? Let's go somewhere else, Sunir said. The group went back to the first floor and walked around the square. When they returned to the first floor at noon, some of the orders that Chili had placed before had already been sold. They went to the counter to take out the magic crystals and paid the corresponding commission. Chili took a look at the receipt and said, let's withdraw the rest of the orders and buy 200 grade 3 earth magic crystals for 12 silver coins each. 12 silver coins? Can we get it? Sasu asked in surprise. Although earth magic crystals were not very valuable, 12 silver coins was too low a price. Yes, look here. Only 2 magic crystals were bought from a list of 13 silver coins, and no one sold it. This proves that this should be a reasonable price. We can lower it by another silver coin. Even if we can't buy it, we won't lose anything. Chili thought for a while and continued, and if we can't get it, I guess there won't be any supply. Who would accumulate such a large amount of low-grade magic crystals? Alas, if only yesterday. Cherry paused all of a sudden. She was not deliberately targeting anyone. Out of the instinct that had been cultivated for a long time, she believed that what should be and what could be saved must be saved. So, she had been feeling sorry for Sunir's performance yesterday. Okay, that's it. Sunir hurriedly grabbed the receipt and canceled all the previous orders. Then, she replaced the order for 200 magic crystals and asked, how much is the deposit? 10 gold coins in total. Sunir quickly counted 10 gold coins and threw them on the counter. Then, she turned around and said as if nothing had happened, okay, where should we go next? In fact, she felt very embarrassed. With Chi Li as a comparison, it was obvious that she was childish in this regard. Let's go have a meal first, then find a weapon shop to repair Morrison's weapon. Han Jin thought for a while and said, Sunir, you should buy some magic arrows too. At dusk, everyone returned with a full load. Everyone was in high spirits. Now that they had money, they could not live like before. Otherwise, what was the point of having so much money? From Hanjin to Stilberg, everyone had changed their clothes. Only Sunir was an exception. As the saying goes, people need clothes and Buddha needs gold. This saying was true. Even Stilberg, who looked a little wretched, had become a lot more energetic. He was so happy that he could not close his mouth. Morrison's sword had been repaired. He also spent more than 30 gold coins to buy a set of tough magic leather armor. He wanted to sell the original leather armor, but unfortunately, he could not sell it at all. Sunir bought more than 1,000 arrows. Among them, more than 60 were magic arrows. If it was not for the space in her space ring, she would have bought more. As for the magic crystals that Hanjin wanted, as Chili expected, there was no more supply. They only received 70 or so magic crystals. Of course, they spent a lot of money, but it was worth it. The feeling of having a big change made everyone very excited. It even made Morrison's forget about the threat that had existed for more than 10 years. He held his head high and strode towards the inn in the distance. When they were less than 50 meters away from the inn, Sunir suddenly stopped and shouted, "Morrison's, wait." "What?" Morrison's turned around in surprise. "Something's wrong," Sunir said coldly. She had already taken off the bow on her back. At this moment, figures suddenly appeared in front, behind, and on both sides. Hanjin and the others were blocked in the middle. A few archers jumped onto the roof and aimed their arrows at the people below. These people all had golden 6-star badges on their chests. This meant that they were all direct subordinates of the Mercenary Association. An old man walked out of the crowd. His body looked very thin and weak, but it was perfectly straight. When he walked, he was very relaxed, but once he stopped there, he was like a nail that did not move at all, giving people a feeling that he could not be shaken. "Why?" Sunir said, word by word. The old man clapped his hands, and 2 big men dragged a person forward. "You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.